family. Church was not an option. It was the way.
She was, for lack of a better term, Mama Bear.
My mom and dad loved each other, looked like how it was supposed to be.
But this picture-perfect life had a dark side.
They were living a life that could invite danger.
He did sit in his room up at night with his shotgun.
When one family member ends up dead, questions begin to swirl.
We were trying to figure out what happened. We were all scared.
And investigators attempt to narrow down a long list of potential suspects.
They were robbing places. They were doing burglaries. They were assaulting people.
There had been some threats. A lot of that seemed to be associated with drug dealing.
He was very strung out on drugs. It was a train wreck.
January 12th, 2003. It's a chilly Sunday afternoon in Meridian, Idaho, a charming community just outside Boise. Following a post-church lunch, 21-year-old Amber Thorngren pulls into the driveway of her parents' modest 3-bedroom home.
She thought that Dad came home from church and did his usual routine. He would always go with his hands. He put his Bible on the bed. He usually changed his clothes and then ate.
He would eat his lunch and play crossword puzzles. That's where you'd find him on Sunday.
But as Amber enters the home, she encounters a scene that's straight out of a horror movie.
Amber walked in the house, and then she saw my dad's legs.
As she approaches, she notices blood coming out of his nose and ears. He's unresponsive.
Amber dials 911 and informs the operator that her father, 42-year-old Kurt Thorngren, may have had an accident.
She's screaming in the phone that Dad fell and she couldn't get him up. She said he hit his head. He had passed out or something.
We obviously all respond there with medics and fire trucks.
But once they're inside the bathroom, there's little first responders can do.
He is pronounced dead at the scene.
It's also clear to police and EMTs that Kurt Thorngren's death was no accident.
He was shot in the mouth. Do we have a suicide? Do we have a homicide? We didn't know.
Kurt Thorngren and his wife Donna had carved out an idyllic Meridian, the same small town where both Kurt and Donna grew up. Like most of his peers, as a young man, Kurt wasn't drawn to outdoorsy pursuits. Instead, Kurt preferred screen time over fly rods and shotguns.
Kurt was a computer geek. He was a computer guy. He wasn't into hunting and fishing and doing those types of things.
But building homemade hard drives and playing video games wasn't Kurt's only passion.
Kurt loved God. Very religious guy. He would go to church every Sunday. It's completely who Kurt was.
He was smart and he would be there for anybody. He was just a good guy. There was nothing anybody could ever say bad about him. He was just a sweetheart.
And it was at church that Kurt realized he was falling in love with an attractive, kind-hearted 19-year-old named Donna Kay.
From kids to up through high school, they were in choir together. My dad was really quiet. My mom was more outgoing. My mom was sweet. She was kind.
Donna was funny. She was very outgoing. She was loving. She loved her family.
My mom, growing up, she had one sister. They did everything together. My granddad and grandma, my mom and my aunt, they did a lot of church activities.
Eventually, Kurt got up the nerve to ask Donna out. She said yes. From the first minute of that first date, Kurt knew Donna was the one.
He decides he's going to marry Donna. He was the type of guy who once he figured out something, he's just going to do it.
Turns out Donna felt the same way.
My mom and dad loved each other. I think they went on one date, and then they were engaged. They were totally opposite in some parts of their life, and I think that religion was the one thing that had them together. I think that my mom wanted a family. My dad wanted a family.
Engaged in 1980, Kurt and Donna married at the church where they met. And 6 months later, Donna learned she was pregnant with twin girls.
2 daughters Lisa.
When we were born, she was working, and then she quit and stayed home. My mom loved us. She would do anything for us kids.
3 years later, Donna gave birth to a third child, a boy named Austin.
Austin was the little brother. He's a good kid. He was always laughing, always smiling.
It seemed like a fairly nice Idaho family.
While Donna stayed at home taking care of the children, Kurt supported the family by working at Hewlett-Packard.
Kurt was a very hard worker. He worked at HP for many, many years. He did a lot of travel with HP.
With Kurt's job providing a solid financial footing, he and Donna found an even stronger foundation in their faith.
We grew up Christian. Church was not an option. It was no drugs, no alcohol, ever.
Kurt didn't have any tolerance for substance abuse, for people who used substances to any degree. He was a clean, loving person. There were rules set that that's not going to happen in this house.
We were taught to not cuss. We were taught to not be disrespectful. My mom was very like a helicopter mom. She always knew everything. Nothing was a secret. We didn't really do anything by ourselves.
And when it came to her baby boy, Austin, Donna was particularly doting.
Donna loved Austin. Very, very much. He's really funny. He always made me laugh. Pretty charismatic, outgoing, for sure.
Austin was a football player. We went to every football game. We did all his sports. My dad did not play sports at all, but my dad went to every single game. He made sure that he was involved in that.
Austin and his mom, they had a pretty open relationship. He could just be himself around her. They talked about everything.
As the kids grew older, Kurt and Donna looked for ways to give back to their community. Donna started an in-home daycare.
My grandma actually had a daycare at her house, and then my mom had a daycare at her house, and then they would do activities and stuff.
Kurt developed a much-needed passion of his own.
My dad met a guy at church, and he was deaf, and they didn't have an interpreter. And my dad didn't think it was fair, so he learned to sign and became an interpreter for the church every Sunday.
I don't believe anyone in Kurt's family was deaf. I think he just fell in love with the culture, the people, and it just made sense to him. There's something about American Sign Language and the deaf culture, the deaf community, that just feels like coming home to some people. And I think that's what it was for Kurt.
I met Kurt through church. Kurt always liked to talk and hang out with us and the interpreters in the church environment. I depended on him, and he depended on me. He was a good person. He was friendly to people. They seemed to be good to each other. They just seemed like they were a good family.
But on a cold January afternoon in 2003, a tragic scene would tear the family apart.
I respond to the residence, and I see Kurt Thorngren in the bathroom. It was a violent death. Make no mistake about that.
Coming up, as detectives delve into what appears to be a suicide investigation, a much more sinister explanation to Kurt's death begins to surface.
Where's the gun? We didn't see a gun.
The window was open. There was some property in there that was unplugged.
We were all scared. We thought people were going to get after us.
After 22 years of marriage and raising 3 kids, the loving, God-fearing couple of Donna and Kurt Thorngren had entered a new phase of their life together. Donna had opened an in-home daycare, while Kurt spent his free time interpreting for the deaf. But on the afternoon of January 12th, 2003, the Thorngrens' life together took a gruesome turn when their 21-year-old daughter Amber found her father Kurt dead in the family home.
He was shot in the face right after he got home from church.
As police begin to process the scene, this presumed suicide investigation quickly comes into question.
Where's the gun? Didn't see a gun. And certainly investigatively, there's a big difference between a suicide and a homicide.
And when investigators take a closer look at Kurt's body, another stunning discovery is made.
Then we learned that he was shot in the mouth, and that he was shot twice on the top of the head.
Kurt had been murdered.
investigators scour the home for clues as to how and why this happened.
It's a single-family home, probably 1,400 square feet, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and Austin's bedroom was on past the bathroom.
The window was opening Austin's bedroom. There was some property in there that was unplugged. Things like electronics were unplugged. They were set like they were going to be taken out of the house. They're kind of moved around as if somebody was going to take them, but didn't take them, like a burglary. Got interrupted. Amber tells us that the front door is ajar when she comes home, which is unusual for her. She says when Dad was there, it would normally be shut and locked.
For detectives, an interrupted robbery seems like a plausible explanation. But at the same time, the nature of Kurt's death also feels personal.
Most likely the first shot will give them the opportunity to flee. I would be incapacitated. To then put 2 more shots in the top of my head indicates that someone wanted me dead.
While CSI processed the scene, investigators turned to Kurt's family. Amber had discovered her father's body as her mother Donna and twin sister Annalisa had just returned home, only to find the house swarming with police and EMTs.
We were trying to figure out what happened. We were all scared. They said he was shot 3 times.
The immediate family was very upset.
But no one seems more shaken up by Kurt's death than his wife of more than 2 decades.
We told my mom that my dad was dead. And she was upset. My mom ran to him and gave him a hug. And he had this look on his face, like, he's just in disbelief. Like, he looked like a ghost.
I mean, genuinely distraught. You could tell that drastically affected by this.
Then the police all asked us if we would go to the police station because they had some questions. And so we all went to the police station. And they were just asking a bunch of questions.
And speaking with the family, Amber and Annalisa and Donna, they all described Kurt as being a person who was very set in his ways or patterned.
Pressed by police for their thoughts on who might have done this to Kurt, Donna and her children draw a blank.
He was a person who had no known enemies. So this was very unusual.
While Kurt sounds like an improbable victim of a targeted killing, Donna and her daughters admit that over the past few months, their family has been plagued by one recurring problem.
Talking with Donna and the girls, they were talking about some prior issues that they had at the home in regards to burglaries.
The house kept getting robbed. We were all scared. We thought people were going to get after us.
As a result, they say, Kurt had become obsessed with protecting his family.
He would talk to family friends and how he was concerned with the safety of his family because of everything that had been going on.
He did sit in his room with his bathrobe on and the shotgun up at night because he was going to protect us.
Investigators ask Donna and the twins if they have any idea who might be responsible for the burglaries. One woman in particular comes to mind.
Jana Gomez, her name was brought to us by the family, ran a house, if you will, where teenage kids could come and either run away to or just find shelter and do what they want. There was no rules there.
The kids that she allowed to stay there were not the good kids. They were robbing places, they were doing burglaries, they were assaulting people. The boys would give her the money, give her everything they had, and she would supply the drugs to them and alcohol. She would give them whatever they wanted.
According to Donna, her 17-year-old son Austin went to school with some of the young men who stayed at Jana's house. And those kids knew exactly when Austin and the rest of the Thorngren family would be out of the house.
We did church Wednesday nights, Sunday. I know that the house was robbed many times, usually on Sundays.
Had one of the young lawbreakers broken into the Thorngrens' home, only to come across Kurt?
They wanted us to check that name out as far as a potential suspect.
We definitely tried to figure out who this Jana Gomez was and where we could find him.
That afternoon, police put out an APB on Jana Gomez, but investigators can't locate Jana in Meridian.
It was a lot of hard work to try to find her.
After an extensive search, when investigators finally do track her down, they discover she isn't even in Idaho.
She was actually incarcerated in Salt Lake City when we interviewed her.
Have you heard about any bad news, violent crimes that may have happened at the
Austin in the Idaho area?
I don't talk to nobody down there.
The death of a gentleman by the name of Curtis Thorngren.
That name sounds familiar.
Okay, he is Austin Thorngren's father.
Oh my God. Oh my God. What happened?
He was murdered in his home.
Jonna is adamant she had no involvement in the crime and denies claims that she encouraged anyone to commit crimes of any nature.
No, I haven't heard. That's why I was like, I didn't know Mr. Thorngren. I never met him.
However, Jonna tells police she does know 17-year-old Austin.
They were friends. Austin would go there and hang out with her and crash there.
I met Austin. He came to me right before Thanksgiving, I believe, and said his parents had thrown him out. I took him in. And he was with me for probably a week or two.
But what was Austin Thorngren, a well-behaved student athlete from a good home, doing hanging around Jonna and her household of alleged juvenile delinquents?
Austin had a lot of hate for his family. I don't know where it came from. They gave him everything in the world.
Coming up, as detectives press Jonna for more details, a dark family secret emerges and leads investigators to a new prime suspect.
I mean, it was a shock because it wasn't something that we were expecting.
He was very strung out on drugs. It was a train wreck.
Police in Meridian, Idaho, are investigating the death of 42-year-old computer engineer Kurt Thorngren, who, alongside his beloved wife Donna, raised 3 children in a tight-knit Christian family.
Kurt was very religious. The daughters talked about the fact that he rarely, if ever, cussed. Always went to church. He was a hardworking man.
For someone to be murdered in their bathroom, to be minding their own business, who had done nothing wrong, just doesn't make sense to me.
After speaking to Donna and her 2 daughters, police have zeroed in on a woman named Jonna Gomez as a person of interest in Kurt's murder.
Jonna is a lady who is my mom's age.
She tells police that she had nothing to do with Kurt Thorngren's murder, but admits she does have a unique relationship with Kurt's son, Austin.
I took Austin in under my wing, and I tried to keep him straight as can be.
According to Jonna, Austin was no longer the all-American kid Donna and Kurt had worked so hard to raise.
Austin's a very lost soul. He uses anything and everything.
Okay, let's if we were making this pot, for sure.
Pot. Oh, he can't live with that pot.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
To what extent?
He smokes it, and then coke, he'll snort it. But he's tried more drugs than I have ever tried.
He started doing drugs, and then Austin started running away. He started hanging out with the wrong people. He quit football. He quit school. When he was getting older with the drugs, my dad didn't agree with the drugs, and Austin became very disrespectful.
According to Jonna, Austin was not the target of robberies. Quite the contrary, in fact.
He was basically just a drug addict, committing burglaries, pawning the proceeds. And he was committing these burglaries with some delinquent friends.
They were ripping each other off. They were ripping each other's dope off because they were all selling, or, this and that, or they're ripping each other and setting each other up, right and left.
For investigators, Jonna's claim raises an instant red flag.
If you have someone dead in their home, and you have a son living a life that could invite danger to the home, your suspect pool could be very large. And that could start you down a path of a very long investigation.
Was this a drug case? Was this a drug deal gone bad, or was this some kind of revenge over drugs?
Maybe this was retaliation against his son.
We assumed that somebody had come in to the house to get Austin, and that my dad was there, and Austin wasn't.
People are killed and injured for drugs all the time.
Methamphetamine's pretty unpredictable how people respond. Anger and rage seems to come often with that. Somebody under the influence doing something normally wouldn't do.
Considering the source of these allegations, detectives aren't sure what to believe. They hope tracking down Austin Thorngren will be the key to cracking the case.
From the interviews with the family, we knew that he had been at Grandma's.
My brother was going to go to my grandma's house. That's where my brother stayed most of the time anyways.
January 15th, Austin Thorngren and his grandmother Alice arrive at the Meridian police station for an interview.
We're free to leave, and this is just, a voluntary statement that Michael got from him that night, Sunday afternoon. And we were just going to afford Austin the same treatment that we did the other folks that night. Just, slipped away from us, for lack of a better term. Relationship for a long time. He'd ask questions about drugs all the time. I'd tell him, I just talking about drugs, so then we were talking about. When was the last time things were good with your dad? Probably when I was 11 years old. Anytime there's drugs injected into an investigation, you have to take that seriously. You have to look at everything.
Knowing that Austin had been involved with some violent characters at Jana's, and that his drug problem had caused a rift in the family, investigators press Austin for more details about his relationship with Kurt.
Will anyone tell us that you even jokingly or something said that you'd like to, see your dad dead, or that you'd like to kill him or anything like that? I know I said I hated him. I said I hated him, but I never said I wanted him dead. Let me just ask the obvious question. Did you kill your dad? Hell no. Hell no. Who killed your dad? I wish. No. I wish I did. Did you have anything to do with your dad's death? Okay.
We did speak with him to get him to give us a glimpse of where he was at that day and what he remembers from the day.
Austin had spent the night at his grandmother's house and had spent the day with a friend named Adam Ketterling. Anything of interest happened from 2 a.m. until you wake up at Grandma's? Just watching a lot of movies. Did you go to sleep? Never. After a while, we goes up till dawn, we're smoking weed.
Austin and Adam Ketterling had been out drugging all night, and they had crashed at the grandmother's house.
Outside the interrogation room, Austin's grandmother confirms his statement, and then promptly brings the interview to a halt.
Alice kind of interjected herself into that conversation and said, well, he's represented by an attorney. We probably better consult him before he gives any statements to you. And then Austin laughed. That was kind of odd in the sense that his father had just been murdered, yet he's not willing to stick around. So that definitely was a little bit of a red flag at that point.
Faced with another dead end, police turn their sights to Austin's close friend, Adam Ketterling.
Adam is Austin's alibi, and so police definitely want to interview him.
I assigned 2 detectives to go find Adam Ketterling because we wanted to interview Adam and see where Austin was during the time of the murder. I don't think he realized what he was getting into.
And when detectives are able to reach Adam, their investigation takes a new turn.
The guys told me that Adam had been located and was going to be coming down to the station. As we're talking with him, he tells us
at night, and he wakes up at Grandma's house the next morning, and Donna is there.
Adam reveals to us that when Donna come to the house around noon, she met with Austin in the shed behind Grandma's house.
Investigators ask Adam what was Donna doing there. Adam tells them he had the same question.
So he goes looking for them, and he comes upon them in the shed. He opens the door, and Austin's sitting on this couch, and Donna's talking to him, and Austin looks up, and his face is just flush, and says, "Can you give us a moment?"
After a while, Donna goes away. Adam goes back there. He said that, Austin looks like he's in shock. He's shaky, and he asks him, what's wrong? Austin, his wife, he looks scared, and he says to Adam, "I think my mom just killed my dad."
I remember thinking, Donna Thorngren? I was quite shocked by that.
Investigators are working to confirm Adam's story, but if his version of events is the truth, what does this mean for the Thorngren family?
It really put us kind of in a tailspin to try to figure out, now what do we have? The friend is telling us that according to Austin, he's been told by his mom that she just killed his dad.
This is at least 2 to 3 hours before Kurt's body is discovered by Amber, the other daughter.
It would have been after he had been murdered, but before the body was discovered.
After all, like Jana, Adam Ketterling isn't exactly the most reliable source.
Adam Ketterling had, admittedly been using drugs all I'd been up all night.
In an effort to uncover the truth, investigators need to reach out to Donna Thorngren to set up an interview. But before that happens, Donna's daughter Amber delivers another tragic bit of information.
Amber calls me and indicates that her mom has potentially overdosed on pills, and they're taking her to the hospital.
She had taken 9 Ambien and implied that she was trying to take her life.
Coming up, Donna's overdose sends detectives to a tailspin, and the case eventually grinds to a halt.
It was shock. It really put us back on our heels a little bit because we didn't anticipate that at all.
But a key piece of evidence resurfaces and breaks the case wide open.
If those clothes were like that when Kurt was killed in that bathroom, the GSR would have been on top. It was a huge break for us.
With a loving marriage, a trio of adoring children, and a devout faith in God, Kurt and Donna Thorngren truly murder. Investigators have a strong suspicion that Donna had something to do with the crime.
A friend is telling us that according to Austin, he's been told by his mom that she just killed his dad.
But before they can track down Donna for questioning, a call from her daughter adds a disturbing twist to the case.
Amber indicates that her mom has potentially overdosed on pills, and they're taking her to the hospital.
She implied that she was trying to take her life.
Was Donna's attempted suicide a reaction to losing the love of her life in such sudden, horrific fashion? Or was she trying to avoid answering questions about potentially killing her own husband? Unfortunately for investigators, it's a conversation that will have to wait.
She was in a protected setting for a couple days where she didn't have to answer questions.
While Donna recovers from her failed suicide attempt, police take a deeper look into her marriage to Kurt.
My dad and mom argued about Austin a lot.
Austin was suffering from a severe meth addiction at the time. It was very heartbreaking. They didn't agree on how to deal with Austin's problems. Kurt's idea was tough love. I'm not going to enable him. Kurt made no secret to the fact that Austin would be moving out when he turned 18.
It wasn't just about moving out. It was about the things I was doing at the house that shouldn't have been allowed, that she would allow. Because Austin would be cooking his meth on the stove.
Donna was more protective. Let's keep an eye on him. Let's do whatever we need to do to keep him under our wing so harm doesn't come to him.
It was hell for my dad. I think that at some point, my dad lost control of Austin. My mom hid a lot of the stuff that was happening. So by the time my dad found out, Austin was already too far in.
As for Kurt's threat to remove Austin from their home when he turned 18, friends say Donna had no intention of ever letting that happen. Which makes the timing of her husband's death all the more suspicious.
Kurt was killed 2 days before Austin was to turn 18. You know, you gotta wonder, is that alone enough to kill your husband? I don't know. People have been killed for less.
Finally, on January 19th, Donna Thorngren is released from the hospital. Police waste no time bringing her in for questioning.
She was out within, I think, a few days.
For a woman who is suspected of murdering her husband, and who almost died days earlier, Donna seems surprisingly composed.
Donna comes in, I meet with Detective Miller and I, and she's very engaged, very cooperative.
Investigators start by going back through Donna's activities on the day of the murder.
Yeah,
That's vital one.
yeah, that's my gas receipt. And so between 7:30 and when I got up, I did,
She was working on that project first thing in the morning, and then she had some errands to run. She went to the Texaco, and then she goes and gets lunch for Kurt.
Yeah, so I would say 10:30 because I went through Taco Time and then went to Taco Bell.
Okay. I think we talked about that. So
Yeah, because I gave you that receipt.
She produces all these receipts.
She has a handwritten timeline, to the minute. It was 9:47, or it was roundabout numbers. It was very specific. So you start being suspicious of all of those things.
She never once cried. Your husband's been murdered, and you're talking about his last moments on Earth. You would kind of get a little weepy, I would imagine. Nothing. It was all very matter of fact.
Towards the end of the interview, we start getting more into the personal side, the relationship between her and Kurt, and to talk about that and talk about those starts to change a little bit, and you can tell she becomes a lot more uneasy in answering those questions.
Describe the relationship between you and Kurt. The last, up until his death. Were you guys getting along?
We fought like normal people.
But did you have like separate rooms?
I slept on the couch, and I have done that. We had 3 big dogs, and the dogs would sleep in the front room with my mom, and then my dad would sleep in his room.
The marriage had been dysfunctional for a very long time.
It came down to power. I think it came down to control. I don't think she felt she had any more control over her life.
And that lack of control only intensified when it came to the family finances.
There was a period that it was really rough, and that's when we got the separate accounts.
Okay, tell us about that.
Because I had a lot of debts. I charge a lot. Because I buy things for my kids, and so that way his was separate. So I had to pay for my own charges.
They did not agree on money. Donna had a massive spending problem.
My mom had an issue with money, and I don't know what the money was spent on. I know she would buy us clothes. I know she spent a lot on us and going out.
Kurt found out that she had racked up about $50,000 in credit card debt, and this debt was incurred secretly.
In 2002, Kurt completely takes financial control over. Donna no longer has access to their bank account.
As detectives' questions become more pointed, Donna makes a startling admission.
What's the worst thing people are going to say that they've heard you say about Kurt?
Oh, probably he's worth more than in life.
What is he worth it?
$50,000.
That's it?
Yeah. He has the basic life insurance. He just added a policy for accidental death.
She's like $50,000. And a true payout was more around $320,000.
Kurt jointly decided to increase it to, I believe, $240,000. Then there's a scratch out on that worksheet, and her handwriting writing at $320,000.
If you're looking at $320,000, that's significant. That alone is motive.
However, Donna steadfastly denies any involvement in Kurt's murder.
I didn't do it. And Austin didn't do it. And if you guys want to charge me, I didn't do it. Are you...
Alice, I never did it.
Are you arresting me?
What's that?
Are you arresting me? No, straight up.
And then the interview is over, obviously, at that point. And we let her walk free. She walks out that day. There was enough doubt with all these little tidbits that you just couldn't shut the door on it. Nothing was the smoking gun, if you will.
Over the next few years, detectives examine and re-examine the case files, but aren't able to glean any additional evidence that might link Donna to the crime. That is, until detectives decide to re-examine the evidence taken from the crime scene.
Donna had told police that she was painting in the bathroom and that she was wearing these pants, and that she had taken off these pants and left them in the bathroom.
They were in a pile, like if you were standing up and you dropped your pants and stepped out, the clothes ended up getting processed for GSR, the gunshot residue.
One thing you gotta realize about GSR is it's like powder goes everywhere. In a tiny enclosed space like this teeny tiny little bathroom, that's why it should have had GSR everywhere on those pants, and they didn't.
If those clothes were like that when Kurt was killed in that bathroom, the GSR would have been on top. And as we stretch those clothes out, that's not the case. The gunshot residue distributed along the clothing and predominantly on the right side of the clothing.
The way the gunshot residue was distributed evenly along the pants means Donna must have been wearing them when Kurt was shot.
It was a huge break for us.
When she told police that she had been wearing those pants and then left them in there and has no idea what happened, she's lying. Because those pants were not in the bathroom when Kurt was murdered. Why would you lie about that unless you have something to hide?
I believe she shot him in the mouth.
Finally, in June 2006, more than 3 years after Kurt Thorngren's murder, authorities are ready to make their move.
We did a grand jury indictment and a warrant for her arrest, and she ultimately turned herself into the sheriff's office.
When Kurt and Donna's twin daughters get wind of their mother's arrest, they're floored.
I was 100% sure that she did not do it. I would have given my life for that. I would have said in a heartbeat that she would have told me. I would have known.
People that believe in her innocence.
But investigators aren't done filing charges against members of the Thorngren family. The same day, they charge Austin as an accessory to murder after the fact.
His involvement was most likely failing to be totally honest with us about who killed his dad.
We believed that at the end of the day, on January 12th, he knew exactly what happened.
Coming up, with Donna and Austin Thorngren now in custody, prosecutors prepare for trial, but questions remain. Most importantly, could a jury ever believe this nice, church-going mother was capable of shooting her own husband at point-blank range?
The jury deliberated for over 3 days.
For months, detectives in Idaho have been building a case against Donna Thorngren, who they believe murdered her husband Kurt in an effort to protect her son Austin from being kicked out of the house, and cash in on a potentially massive life insurance policy in the process.
It took us a very long time to put the whole thing together.
You got stacks of tapes of interviews and the GSR. You start putting all those puzzle pieces together into a workable document that would stand up in court.
On July 23, 2007, in Ada County Court, Donna Thorngren's trial begins. Her twin daughters, Amber and Annalisa, greet the proceedings with mixed emotions.
We just want the truth. That's what all we said the whole time. That's all we want. We can't change anything, but tell us the truth.
Prosecutors open their case by laying out what they believe happened that fateful day in 2003.
Kurt came home from church. Donna was hiding somewhere in the house, possibly the computer room across from the bathroom.
I think she already had the weapon. She already prepared for what she was going to do. She knew Kurt's behavior. She knew when he would be there.
There was possibly a confrontation right there in the door of the bathroom. She shot him in the mouth. He went down. She stood over him. She took closer aim and put 2 more on the top of his head to make sure he was dead.
When it's their turn, the defense largely hinges their case on a single yet important point.
It was a completely circumstantial case. They were unable to find the same gun that they believed had been used in the murder.
It's a point prosecutors can do little to rebut, and is far from open and shut.
Interestingly enough, the jury deliberated for over 3 days.
I just remember my mom sitting there. She didn't look at us. She didn't cry. She just sat stone-faced.
At the end of the day, they came back with guilty.
Her sentence was life in prison with the first 20 years fixed. At 20 years, she gets to appear before the parole commission.
As the years have passed, even Donna Thorngren's staunchest supporters have begun to question her story. In fact, maybe they were wrong about this devoted housewife and mother of 3 all along.
My mom is lying about what happened. She had something to do with it. I don't know what exactly she did. I don't know if she pulled the trigger, but she was there. You didn't stop it, and you set it up. So, that's on you. All you have to do is tell the truth. She won't. That's what hurts, is that she didn't give us an option. We don't have family. It ruined everything. It ruined our lives. It ruins everything.
For more information on Snapped, go to Oxygen.com.
She was laying face down in the mud. In a lot of cases, it's a whodunit. In this case, it was, who is it?
As the details of the case emerge, all eyes focus on one key suspect.
He was just kind of a wild guy that liked to party hard. There was some concern that this was maybe sexually motivated.
And allegations of a long-hidden family secret come to light.
Her husband had passed away. She had been telling some of her friends that her deceased father had sexually molested her. You start peeling back the layers, and you start seeing that there is some dysfunction. Outbursts, yelling, screaming, turbulent behavior.
She's gonna Sunday, March 15th, 2015. It's just after 1 p.m. in the town of North Ridgeville, Ohio. The sun is shining, and a local real estate developer is out for a Sunday drive. The man stops by a property he owns on Victory Lane.
It's a dead-end cul-de-sac. It was a wooded area, but it had just been cleared by the developer. He was down there on the work.
As he walks his property, he approaches a snowbank and catches a glimpse of something truly horrific.
He observed a female that was partially nude from the waist down, lying face down behind the snowbank. Upon seeing that it was a human body, that it was unresponsive, he immediately called 911.
Within minutes, patrol officers are on the scene.
I remember coming around the side of the snow mound, and she was laying face down in the mud, and it was very clear that she had died.
We had preserved the scene. We didn't want to touch anything. We called our supervisor, in which he called the detective bureau. Come in.
Bureau detectives Patrick West and Greg Pitek arrive on the scene shortly after 2 p.m.
It was apparent that she had died a violent death. There was blood on her face and on her head, and it wasn't immediately clear if she had been shot, if she had been stabbed. There was no clear indication of a cause of death. There was really no clear indication of what caused the trauma. There was no form of identification. You know, basically, at that point, all we had was a deceased female.
She's just laying there. Somebody pulled up and just threw her out like a bag of garbage.
With the play is involved.
The female's body was nude from the waist down. Her shirt had been pulled up, exposing her breast. There was some concern that this was maybe sexually motivated. Perhaps this was somebody that was abducted and sexually assaulted and then murdered. The Ohio Turnpike was mere yards from where the victim was found. It's one of the busiest interstate highways in this country, so we didn't know if this was a victim that was dumped here, perhaps from out of state.
Investigators scour the scene for a wallet, driver's license, or any other evidence that might offer a clue to the woman's identity. But they come up empty.
In a lot of cases, it's a whodunit. In this case, it was, who is it? And if you don't know who your victim is, it makes it very difficult to find out who killed the victim. There was no traces of any blood on the pavement nearby. There was no traces of blood on the nearby areas surrounding the body. So it became apparent that the victim had been dumped there and she had been killed somewhere else.
In hopes of IDing the victim, detectives turn the body over to the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner. While the ME scrubs through local fingerprint records in search of a match, detectives pore over a nationwide database of recent missing persons reports.
We weren't able to find any missing persons reports that matched this victim. We weren't able to find any fingerprints on file, so we were at wit's end with trying to determine her identity.
At this point, investigators make the difficult decision to go public with a description and photos of the victim.
She's described as 5'9" to 5'10", about 200 pounds, about 18 to 30 years of age, with brownish, reddish dyed hair. They're hoping someone can identify her by these images we're going to show you now. 2 distinctive tattoos that were found on the victim. We do want to warn you, now we're going to show you the victim's face. Investigators, again, only releasing this image because they definitely want to identify her.
It was a tough decision because we want to be sensitive, but we also wanted to find out who she was.
I asked myself if this was my daughter, would I want a police department releasing a picture of her? We came up yes.
They are sending these pictures and images out across the country in hopes of identifying this young woman.
It was mere hours after we released images of the victim's face that we received a call.
Hello, I just saw a picture of my daughter, and I haven't seen her since Thursday night.
Okay, what's your first name?
Janet.
Okay, and your last name?
Tyburski.
To the victim's mother, 45-year-old Janet Tyburski, her 3 children, and handsome 4-year-old grandson meant everything to her. And after 15 years as a...
Here you have this woman who's very kind and very polite and understanding. There was never a terse word, never any conflict. She was so pleasant so polite, and so charming.
Not that Janet's life hadn't had its share of ups and downs. In the mid-1990s, Janet and her husband, a former star college football player named Daryl Tyburski, were climbing the professional and social ladder in Cleveland, Ohio.
He was a criminal defense attorney. He practiced in Cuyahoga County, did a lot of defense work, good attorney.
Everyone seemed to like him. Colleagues and the prosecutors, they really thought very highly of him.
Janet and Daryl had 3 children together, Megan, Hannah, and Rochelle, aka Shelley. And though the girls certainly gave this stay-at-home mom a run for her money, Janet poured her heart and soul into them.
They had a pretty close relationship. Daryl was a good dad and provider.
But in 1999, the Tyburskis' near-perfect life together was shattered.
Daryl Tyburski, he was coming home from a party and drove off the road, and it was by a marina, drove into a fenced-in area where boats were at, and he died from the crash.
Daryl's unexpected death left Janet devastated.
It was sudden, and I know it was tragic, and I know it was a big impact on his family.
As for the children, Hannah and Megan were too young to fully process their father's sudden passing. But for 10-year-old Rochelle, his death was extremely traumatic.
She'd been close with her father, so it had proven to be difficult and something she kind of tried to cope with.
Though Janet did everything she could to care for her, shortly after her father's death, Rochelle began demonstrating some unusual behavior.
Typically, most outbursts Shelley would have would be yelling, screaming, maybe throwing some items around the house. It didn't rise to the level of physical violence so much, but just more of turbulent behavior.
Janet sought professional help for her daughter, and at the age of 12, Rochelle was diagnosed with bipolar disorder.
Rochelle had some psychological issues, and she had some behavioral issues growing up.
Medication and therapy seemed to help quell Rochelle's outbursts. In need of a fresh start, Janet sold the home she and Daryl had purchased together and moved to a new house in Lakewood.
Janet was very proud to live in Lakewood. It's nice. Lakewood's a nice community.
Over the next decade, Janet and the girls flourished. By 2011, Hannah and Megan were looking forward to college, and Rochelle gave birth to a baby boy. While Rochelle was thrilled about motherhood, her relationship with the baby...
Looking for a full committed relationship.
Despite the failure of that romance, Rochelle wasn't alone in raising her son. Janet was always by her side.
Janet Tyburski loved her grandson, wanted what was best for him. She provided a big role in the caregiving of the child, and she was very involved.
By the end of winter of 2015, Janet's 2 younger daughters, Hannah and Megan, had left for college, which allowed Janet to focus all her energy on Rochelle and the baby.
Janet was basically running the show in the house, and not only taking care of Shelley, but taking care of Shelley's young son.
After 15 years spent making the most of a tragic situation, Janet Tyburski was proud of her unconventional but happy family.
Here you have this woman who's a sweet grandmother. She's got 3 daughters that she practically raised on her own because her husband had passed away. Janet had made the comment that life had given her lemons and, she was going to make lemonade out of it.
But now, Janet has informed police that one of her daughters is the heartbreaking victim found that day, and the Tyburski family is about to face another terrible family tragedy, one with unimaginable consequences.
Somebody had died a violent death, and eventually some family members were going to deserve some answers.
Coming up, when the victim's identity is discovered, a prime suspect comes into focus.
He liked to drink, he liked to party, he liked to rock and roll.
Here we go. We got us a very strong lead.
Lakewood, Ohio police detectives are less than 36 hours into the murder investigation of an unidentified young female.
A body was found in North Ridgeville, kind of off in a field, partially clad. She had no identification on her.
After reaching out to the public for help identifying the victim, police finally get a break when a call comes into the station on March 16th, 2015.
That person that called Lakewood PD was Janet Tyberski. She saw a picture of her daughter on television, and that was our victim.
Oh my God.
Okay, it's okay.
Oh my God, this is a nightmare.
Janet, I'm sorry, what's your daughter's first name?
Rochelle.
Dispatchers informed detectives of the call. They head immediately to the Tyberski residence in Lakewood.
When we came into Janet's home, she was sitting on the couch. She had some family members already there with her. It appeared that she had been crying her disbelief.
Rochelle's sister Hannah was there. And Hannah was a student, a college student at a local university. She was very upset. She was crying.
Fighting back tears, Janet tells detectives about Rochelle's struggles with mental illness.
She has bipolar and personality disorders and takes meds for that ever since age 12 or so.
She took medication for her mental illness, and that helped, but there were still rough times. She had difficulty holding a job. She lived at home, so Janet was basically her caretaker, for lack of a better term.
Janet tells investigators that lately, taking care of Rochelle had been easier said than done. Especially after Rochelle reconnected with the father of her child, Tommy Fialco.
The indication we got is that Janet felt that Tommy was not really good for Rochelle, and especially not good for her grandson to be in that situation.
We learned that Tommy was basically a hard-living rock and roll type of guy. He played in a rock and roll band, had some past encounters with law enforcement, mostly related to probably drugs and alcohol. He wasn't a career criminal. He was just kind of a wild guy that liked to party hard and have fun, and occasionally he'd have some encounters with law enforcement, but not a substantial criminal background.
She would leave and be gone for 5, 6, 7 days at a time, and normally she was at Tommy's place.
And according to Janet, that's where she assumed Rochelle was headed when she left the house late Thursday night.
You heard her leave?
Yeah, I heard the car. I'm like, okay, so she did go, and now I need to go down and lock the door. So I came and locked the door. So I know she wasn't here.
And it was about 2:30 or around midnight.
Yeah. I didn't want to get into anything at that hour. I didn't want her to do it. I'm like, I can't deal with this anymore. Let her go. Just let her go.
Janet's account is confirmed by her middle daughter, Hannah, who was home from nearby Oberlin College for the weekend.
Hannah said that she didn't see Shelley that whole weekend, that she was under the impression that she had gone to Tommy's.
For detectives, the news that Rochelle's rock and roll boyfriend might have been the last person to see her alive is an immediate red flag.
Janet didn't come right out and say that any one person could have possibly harmed Shelley, but she painted a clear picture that Shelley's on-again, off-again boyfriend and the father of her child had a rather sordid past.
Tommy had a violent past. There was some arrests for prior violent behavior. There appeared to be some drug and alcohol issues. Right away, we felt we had a good lead, a very strong, solid lead.
Now, Tommy is the prime suspect in Rochelle's murder.
Spoke to him at his apartment in Cleveland.
Rochelle met local rock and roll singer Tommy Fialco shortly after her 21st birthday. She was immediately taken with Tommy, despite the fact that he was 18 years older than her.
I was walking out of a doctor's appointment, and she approached me from a bus stop that was just outside the doctor's office and asked me if I knew where Sloan Avenue was. And I said, yeah, it's right down here. We kind of started talking. I thought she was cute, and she was kind of being flirtatious. I told her about the music studio that I had, and I invited her to come down and come check it out. And so we just kind of hit it off from there.
Janet made it clear she had serious reservations about Rochelle dating a hard-partying rocker.
She felt maybe Rochelle being with Tommy was not a good thing.
When her and I were together, it was really her and my time. I was a lot older than her. She would, come to this music studio, and we would just hang out, and what we did.
Then, just a few months into the relationship, Rochelle made an unexpected announcement.
Shelley and I became very close, and we ended up having a son together.
Janet's misgivings about the relationship seemed justified when, a few months into the pregnancy, Rochelle and Tommy parted ways.
We ended up just growing apart at a point in time, and we were to a point where we didn't talk.
Tommy tells detectives that he and Rochelle had reignited their romance a few months earlier.
I decided to try to contact Shelley again and see if there's any chance of rekindling what her and I had. And it worked. We actually got together.
Tommy told us that Shelley would come over on the weekends. They'd party together, have some drinks. They didn't have a real serious relationship. I think it would be characterized as friends with benefits.
Tommy tells police he never saw Rochelle at all during the weekend in question. In fact, Tommy claims he hadn't been able to reach Rochelle for several days.
My last communication with her was about 8:30 on Thursday night. And she was supposed to call me Friday morning, and she never did. Now, that's the same time you say that Janet told you guys that I picked her up at 2 in the morning. And I never did. I didn't know what was going on. I had a call in the morning, a call in the evening, no return phone calls.
Detectives asked Tommy, if he wasn't with Rochelle all weekend, then what was he doing? According to Tommy, the same thing he did every weekend. Drink. Hard.
Well, I'm always drunk. I'm just being honest with you. Yeah, like I said, the only reason I know it's Tuesday right now is I know it's St. Patrick's Day. Alright, and I slept all day yesterday. The day before, I drank a bottle of Jack, half a bottle of Crown, and about 20 beers. So I've been in a blackout drunk for the last 4 days. I was blacked out. That was my weekend. That's what I did all weekend. She comes and goes, you know? I mean, I don't keep track of when she comes and leaves.
Though he can't recall any specifics from his weekend-long binge,
Worked for some defense that he didn't remember, or he was trying to explain why he didn't remember what happened. That was rather disturbing to hear. We confronted him directly. We asked him, did you kill Shelley? And he adamantly stated that he did not and had nothing to do with it.
Her and I've never had an argument, really.
You and her never had any physical confrontations or struggles or anything?
No.
I know how women are, so I mean, sometimes they get out of hand, especially, they're drinking.
Shelley's just a handful. Look, if she don't take her medication, man, she's really kind of loopy.
Coming up, detectives question if this bad boy's blackout means he's hiding something more sinister. Can they trust the chilling information they hear from him next?
Whoever she went with picked her up off the face, I guarantee it.
On March 16th, 2015, 45-year-old Janet Tyberski told investigators that she had last seen her daughter Rochelle on Thursday, March 12th, and that she believed Rochelle had spent the weekend with her on-again, off-again lover, local musician Tommy Fialco. But when questioned by police, Tommy stands firm.
Tommy continued to deny being involved, and so we started asking him, who do you think would have done something like this?
That's when Tommy reveals that any number of men could be responsible for Rochelle's murder.
Look, she's a good girl, but she has serious personality disorders. She didn't have the maturity of a 26-year-old. She was more like a, 14 or 15-year-old in her head. She's seen a psychiatrist regularly. Like I said, she always said a lot of stuff that was untrue. Mm-hmm. Her mom probably told you that she has personality disorders. She cheats on me all the time. It's a regular thing with her.
Tommy kind of painted a picture of Shelley being somewhat careless with her interactions with other men. Sometimes that she would run off with other men maybe she didn't know very well.
Like last time she cheated on me, she met this guy, and then took off. I don't know any idea where she was for 3 days. Whoever she went with picked her up off the Facebook, I guarantee you. If you get her mom's computer, you got to find out who she was talking to.
Detectives aren't sure if Tommy is being honest or trying to throw them off course. Either way, they don't have enough to arrest him. Investigators returned to the Tyberski residence to check the family computer.
What we did is we started trying to delve into Rochelle's social media. We started with her computer.
Janet gladly grants investigators access to the computer, and a subsequent search of Rochelle's social media accounts reveals Tommy's statement might actually be true.
She had been communicating over a Facebook Messenger with a saint. We were able to make some queries with law enforcement databases. We knew his approximate age, we knew his first and last name, we knew basically where he lived, and we were able to find a phone number. We interviewed Brandon, and he said, yeah, we were talking on Facebook Messenger.
Knowing that Rochelle may have been sexually assaulted, investigators ask Brandon about the nature of their relationship. But Brandon claims investigators have the wrong idea.
They had known each other in high school, and they continued to keep in touch over the years, but They weren't having any sort of a intimate relationship or boyfriend-girlfriend situation. He said we didn't have any plans to hang out that weekend or that night. Brandon told us that he was at work a lot of the time during that weekend.
When police run down his story, Brandon's alibi checks out. When detectives receive the results of Rochelle's autopsy, one detail throws them for a loop.
The coroner determined that there was not a sexual assault, so we could rule out that it was sexually motivated.
Could this mean that the crime scene was staged to look like a sexually motivated crime?
The fact that the victim had no identification or no personal belongings with her that would help us identify her, the way the victim was dressed and the way that she was left at the scene, especially with her wrists being bound with a ligature, told us that we were dealing with somebody that wanted to delay our efforts, probably in the hopes that the perpetrator would not be eventually discovered.
Another key piece of information provided by the autopsy is Rochelle's likely cause of death.
The coroner had determined that there was a possibility that she could have been asphyxiated or suffocated.
Suffocation and strangulation as a method of murder often indicates that the perpetrator is someone close to the victim, which inspires investigators to take another look at their original suspect.
We had some theories as to what Tommy's motivations might be if he did kill Shelley. We didn't know if this was a domestic disturbance that got out of hand, if they had been drinking or using drugs together and they got in an argument, one thing led to another.
We brought him in, we took him downtown to the Cleveland Homicide Headquarters. And at that point, we interviewed Tommy for close to 6 hours, and Tommy would not come off his story.
I knew when he talked to me that I'm their guy. In his head, I'm their guy. I already knew it, just by the way he was talking to me. Mr. Fialco, you need to come here now. This isn't a joking matter. We need to speak with you. So listen, I know it's not a joking matter.
He was adamant that he had nothing to do with it, but he was familiar with the criminal justice system, and we thought maybe that he was just stonewalling us.
The crux of the interrogation centers around Janet Tyburski's statement that she heard a car in her driveway the night Rochelle was last.
A car come. She heard someone leave the house. I've never picked her up at 2 in the morning, ever. I've never called her later than 10 o'clock because her mom told me not to.
He claims he was nowhere near the Tybursky residence the night Rochelle disappeared. And if police want to know the truth about what happened to Rochelle, they need to be talking to Janet, not him.
Dude, just the whole story that Janet's telling me. She's leaving out. She's not telling you the whole truth. She's not telling you the whole story. There's something wrong with her, you know?
So we had learned from Tommy that there had been an argument between her and her mother about something that Shelley had been telling some of her friends in the week leading up to her disappearance, that her deceased father had sexually molested her when she was a child, and that her mother stood by and watched.
That was something that, Janet never disclosed to us or never told us that there was any issues leading up to that weekend when Rochelle disappeared.
Tommy says that although he's fairly certain the abuse allegations were just another one of Rochelle's delusions, he tried to talk to Janet about it, which, according to Tommy, sent her into a blind rage.
She's just in anger mode and that's it. Janet, I believe she said, don't worry, I'll take care of this. And, she just sounded really angry. And I said, Janet, don't get angry about this, you need to talk to her doctor about this. I really think her mom could do something like that, man, but... I gotta be honest, dude. She was pissed off about that whole thing. She's not being honest to you guys about the whole story, and that they were arguing about it. I just got a bad feeling about her, man. This just don't make sense. And I know she's lying. I know it, and she knows it. You're figuring it out, but you'll see, I haven't been dishonest about anything this whole time. I told you everything.
That was a very telltale sign that we now had to start looking at Janet as a suspect.
Coming up, investigators get a break in the case.
We actually could see a silver minivan turn down this road.
And a family secret comes to light.
They're pretty certain that you're an accessory after the fact. So they're going to be talking to you.
Police in suburban Cleveland are investigating the brutal murder of 26-year-old Rochelle Tybursky. Their primary suspect in the case is Rochelle's on-again, off-again boyfriend and father of her child, Tommy Fialco. But in an interview with detectives, Tommy says Rochelle had recently claimed to have been sexually abused by her late father, and that the allegation had enraged Rochelle's mother, Janet.
She's not being honest to you guys.
Investigators turned to the other person at the Tyburski residence the weekend Rochelle disappeared, her 19-year-old sister, Hannah, in hopes she can provide some clarity. During the interview, Hannah reiterates that she came home from college on Saturday afternoon and had not seen or spoken to Rochelle.
She had come home that Saturday evening to do some work. She was trying to fill out a job application.
Investigators ask Hannah if they can take a look at her cell phone to possibly help confirm the timeline of her statement and to see what, if any, contact she'd had with Rochelle.
When our officers attempted to get her phone from her, she was in the process of trying to immediately delete conversations. She definitely was attempting to hide something.
She stood right up and walked right out of the interview. She just panicked and got right up and left.
That only strengthened our belief that now we're looking at the right person when we start looking at Janet.
On the heels of Hannah's odd behavior, detectives obtain a search warrant for Janet's silver minivan. What they find continues to strengthen their suspicion.
When they searched the van, there was a blood stain on the driver's door that they had swabbed, and those items were sent for the lab for processing.
As they wait for the blood analysis results, investigators collect surveillance footage from businesses along the route between the Tyburski home and the location where Rochelle's body was found.
The early morning hours of March 15th, we actually could see a silver minivan turn down this road, and the vehicle was back there for approximately 8 or 9 minutes, and then reemerged and left the area. It just so happens that that silver minivan was consistent with the same make, model, and color as the silver minivan that Janet Tyburski owns.
The video evidence is compounded once the results come back on the blood found in Janet's van.
They came back positive for Rochelle's blood. At that point, we were pretty certain that Janet was responsible for her daughter's death.
But why would Janet kill her own daughter? Detectives wonder if there's more to the possible motive than Rochelle's claims of sexual abuse.
We fought a lot and struggled with the possibility of a mother being responsible for their adult daughter's death.
On May 5th, investigators returned to Janet's home, armed with a search warrant.
As always, anytime we've had contact with Janet, she was cordial. She invited us in.
At that point, we said, here's a copy of the warrant, and she asked us to sit down at her dining room table in her home.
Investigators expect Janet to again deny any wrongdoing, but no.
Go ahead and confess to killing Rochelle.
I look at Detective West, he looks at me, and, we're kind of shocked.
According to Janet, Rochelle's decade-long emotional roller coaster had recently reached a new low. Beyond the unfounded allegation about her deceased father molesting her, Rochelle had become more violent than ever, to the point Janet feared for both her and her grandson's lives.
It's been escalating. I felt safety was definitely at risk, and I killed her on the early hours of Friday the 13th in a crime of passion.
After confessing to killing Rochelle, Janet paces detectives through the night of the crime. According to Janet, it started when she made a last-ditch effort to protect her grandson from Rochelle.
This poor little guy, he's perfect. He's so freaking amazing. And she knows this, but she can't control this piece. Whatever's going on in her mind, making up these stories as if they're fact. And I said, my God, what are you doing, honey?
Janet wanted custody of the grandson, and we don't believe that Rochelle wanted to give her custody. Janet told us was that Rochelle indicated she was going to take her son with her and move in with Tommy.
I told her about not going to Tommy's. I need to work on getting at least temporary custody so we can get childcare. And she was pissed off.
Shelley didn't want to do that, and there was a disagreement over that. Apparently a chair had been thrown.
She made a statement, that she's going to kill me in my sleep.
Janet says That was the moment she decided to put an end to the situation once and for all. She stayed awake until Rochelle went to bed around 3 a.m.
Shelley took medication. That medication had the effect of knocking her out. She said she waited about 15 or 20 minutes because she knew the medication had taken effect by then. As she went upstairs, got a blanket and a pillow from another bedroom, walked into Shelley's bedroom.
So when she went to sleep, I smothered her in her bed.
Rochelle woke up and realized that, her mother was trying to smother her with a pillow. She began to struggle. They had fallen onto the floor, with Janet on top of her still.
I think part of her head fell onto the floor.
Did you bang it against the floor?
I may have.
Janet started banging Rochelle's head into the wooden floor, which I think rendered her unconscious. And at that point, she continued to suffocate her daughter.
The most chilling that she said, "You're going to be with Daddy now. Go be with Daddy." I don't think Janet stopped until Shelley stopped moving, and Janet was sure that Shelley was dead. After that happened, did you go to bed or did you stay up?
I went to sleep.
She just closed the door and went to bed, and the next day she started coming up with a plan to dispose of the body and all the evidence.
Janet reveals to police that she turned to 19-year-old Hannah for help.
She had called Hannah home from college, went and picked her up, and then told her about how she'd murdered Rochelle.
She sits Hannah down and reveals she's dead upstairs in her bedroom right now, and I need your help getting rid of the body.
That's right where I should have stopped, Hannah. I should have never been involved in that.
Hannah was obviously put in a situation where, what would you do if a family member, especially your mother, came to you and said, "Hey, I did this"?
Janet claims that in the early morning hours of March 15th, she and Hannah loaded Rochelle's body into the back of the minivan and drove to North Ridgeville before ultimately dumping her on Victory Lane.
After dumping the body, they took Hannah back to college, dropped her off, and then Janet went home.
With her confession on the record, Janet asks if she can make a phone call.
Right after Janet confessed to us, she got on the phone and she contacted Hannah right in front of us.
I just confessed to murdering Rochelle. Yeah, I did, honey. I told him, I'm telling him everything that happened. And I know that they feel that you're an accessory after the fact, though. So they're going to be talking to you, okay?
It's clear to detectives that Janet regrets a budding construction empire.
She had a really good job. She was really striking. She had a nice figure. She was fun.
He was the fun-loving attorney who captured her heart.
He was a happy-go-lucky kind of guy.
From that point on, they were in a full-on relationship.
But soon, a cold-blooded crime would put their red-hot romance on ice.
There was what appeared to be a dead body wrapped in a blanket.
As investigators search for answers, they unearth dark secrets kept hidden for years.
He told one of his neighbors that he was interested in her.
She thought he was having an affair with the housekeeper.
She just couldn't control the dark side.
I had went to lunch, and when I came back, there was a butcher knife in my chair.
I've not investigated a case like this since. I hope I never do, but it's one that I'll never forget.
Salinas, California, September 1st, 2010. It's a Wednesday afternoon, and police are responding to a 911 call at the home of local attorney Mark Hafen.
Some of his coworkers had called dispatch and notified them that they hadn't seen him in days and asked for a welfare check.
His house was maybe 5 minutes away from the office. So I drove over there. I had a gut feeling that something bad had happened because Mark would always call if he was running late. It wasn't like Mark not to call me.
They were really concerned about him. The officers checked all of the doors and windows in an attempt to get in and located a single open window.
The smallest officer that was there was tasked with climbing through the window, which he did. Once he got through that bedroom window, he tried to open the front door but couldn't because it had been screwed or nailed closed. Tried to open the sliding glass door to the backyard where the other officers were waiting, but again could not get that open because it had been screwed closed.
Eventually, the officer is able to raise the garage door.
They went inside immediately. They began to search the house, and the odor inside led those officers to think that someone was dead or something was dead. From there was a hallway. You went down that hallway, there was a bedroom. The officers found the victim dead.
He was between a bed and a dresser on the floor. And the space wasn't very big, maybe 12 to 18 inches, and his body was rolled up on his side. And he had multiple layers of blankets and sleeping bags wrapped around him.
Once the coroner pulled that bag back slightly, he noticed right away his silence, but we still didn't know if it had been self-inflicted.
The son of a prominent local veterinarian, Mark Welker Hafen was born and raised in the Salinas area.
He was a happy-go-lucky kind of guy. He was always joking around and liked to have fun.
As a teenager, Mark was an avid surfer, regularly making the half-hour drive to the coast to catch some waves.
When I was a junior in high school, I had a class with Mark, and I started surfing, and he was one of the guys that was at the beach.
But surfing wasn't Mark's only passion. After high school, he set his sights on becoming a lawyer.
He was working throughout the day, and then at night he'd go to Monterey College of Law, and he put himself through law school that way.
I basically met Mark at the beach. We both surfed at Moss Landing. I only found out after the fact he'd gone to law school and was practicing in Salinas.
He was an attorney who took cases maybe that other attorneys wouldn't take, maybe charged less money for those that couldn't afford the steep price of someone else.
Over the years, Mark's practice thrived, but his personal life wasn't nearly as successful. By 2005, Mark was in his 50s with 2 failed marriages behind him and 3 grown children.
His last divorce, he took that really hard, so he was trying to find himself after that. I think it was like a midlife crisis is what he was going through.
That year, Mark took a case that would change his life forever. Like Mark Hafen, Virginia Turner was a Salinas native through and through. Though unlike Mark, Virginia didn't have the luxury of a laid-back middle-class upbringing.
Virginia Turner came from a poor family and grew up in sort of, I'm not going to say poverty, but grew up in not as much money.
She kind of had an off relationship with her mother, although her mother certainly tried to help her at various times. And she was pretty independent in that she moved out when she was 16 and lived on her own with a job, going to school. And so when she was in high school, she was actually living in her own place.
Hardworking and ambitious, Virginia was determined to forge a better life for herself.
She ended up becoming involved in construction and becoming a contractor, and then had a contracting business of her own.
It was like a cleanup business where if there was like a storm damage to a house or a business, she would clean that up. Or if there was a hazmat, she'd clean that up.
Building a business in a male-dominated field like construction was no easy task. But Virginia won over clients with both her work ethic and her personality.
When you talked to her, she was?
Like Mark Hafen, Virginia's professional success did not always lead to romantic success.
She always seemed to have been involved in kind of tumultuous relationships.
In the mid-90s, Virginia's hard luck in love seemed to turn around when she met an outgoing Renaissance man named Gordon Legault.
I was in the local country music bar, and a friend of mine introduced me to her there. And she ended up giving me a ride home. The next day, she called me and asked me if I wanted to go for lunch, and I did. She was really striking. She had a nice figure. She was fun, and she was outgoing. She would do anything for anybody. She had a really good job. She would wine and dine and buy stuff and take me on trips. Mexico, San Francisco, and Las Vegas.
But like all of Virginia's other relationships, the ups and downs proved too much to bear.
It was good for a while, and then it would be bad, and then it would be good, and then it would be bad. And so we had a lot of arguments. We would have a spat, and it was ridiculous stuff, and I would say to myself, well, that's not how it's supposed to be. It was just too much after a while.
Over the next decade, Virginia's work life continued to thrive. And though she kept putting herself out on the dating scene, she could never quite seem to find Mr. Right. Then, in 2004, Virginia went through another breakup, one that took a huge toll on her and on her business.
She seemed to have a fairly good business until she got hooked up with a partner that worked in the business with her. And then, because of domestic violence with him, she wanted to separate out the business, and that's when she decided to file bankruptcy.
To handle her bankruptcy, Virginia needed a lawyer, so she turned to one of the most respected and affordable attorneys in Salinas, Mark Hafen.
Virginia Turner was actually a client of ours, and there was one time when she came in and Mark came out of his office and he said, "I'm going to lunch now." And so I put two and two together that Mark and Virginia were going to lunch, and so that was the first time that I was thinking, okay, well, maybe it was a friendly lunch, but it ended up being something more.
From that point on, they were in a full-on relationship.
And unlike the couple's previous relationships, this one appeared to have staying power.
Mark and Virginia were a cute couple. They liked country music and they liked to go line dancing.
Mark was this sort of laid-back surfer guy, game for anything, and Virginia was this high-octane spark plug of a woman.
After just a couple months of dating, Mark and Virginia moved in together.
He owned a home on Don Pedro Lake, and they lived there together. They seemed to make a terrific couple, two successful professionals who had a lot in common and seemed to be deeply attracted to each other.
In September of 2009, in need of some improvements, Mark and Virginia thought that moving into the home where Mark grew up would be the best place for them to take the next step in their relationship.
Virginia was going to help him remodel that.
He was happy. You know, he was dating someone and he was spending time with someone. And, you know, I knew that's what he wanted.
But sadly, Mark and Virginia would never get the chance to transform his childhood home into the house of their dreams. That's because a lifeless body has been found on the floor of the couple's master bedroom. And as detectives survey the scene, the mystery only deepens.
Blood all over the walls, bed in disarray. How did he get on the floor? What did he die of?
Coming up, as detectives attempt to answer those questions, another, more sinister side to this tragedy is revealed.
He was seriously worried that his life was in danger.
Then I knew something was terribly wrong.
As these facts start coming in, you hear all these different stories. It was sick. Yeah, I'm in disbelief.
California natives Mark Hafen and Virginia Turner seemed to be living the perfect life together.
They loved each other and they lived together. Life for Mark and Virginia was as good as it gets.
But on September 1st, 2010, Mark and Virginia's picture-perfect romance was ripped apart at the seams. Police responding to a welfare check in Salinas have discovered a lifeless body on the floor of Mark Hafen's master bedroom.
The body was in a space beside the bed and beside a bureau. It had 4 different layers of blankets on it.
As investigators uncover the body, it's immediately apparent that it is indeed the man they've been called to check on, and that his death was a violent one.
The skull was somewhat crushed and some brain matter was oozing out.
Officers immediately bring homicide detectives in on the case.
When we arrived on scene, there were several officers on scene and Mr. Hafen's secretary.
I just felt numb. My headspace was crazy. I don't remember a lot. I mean, I remember that I needed to do whatever the police needed.
According to Mark's secretary, Missy, Mark had been living with his girlfriend, Virginia Turner.
I didn't hear from her for 2 days, and that wasn't like Virginia.
Detectives ask Missy to stand by for questioning while they begin assessing the scene.
The spare bedroom was in disarray. There was loose change strewn about the floor and a single white garbage bag with a red drawstring. And almost every door and window that we came across had been screwed shut from the inside.
In the living room, detectives find a clue that suggests Virginia might have also been a victim.
There was also a robe on the couch that looked to have small droplets of blood and droplets of blood on a pillow.
If this is Virginia's robe, you have to wonder if Virginia was attacked here and Mark was attacked in the bedroom. This could mean that Miss Turner's body is somewhere inside the home as well.
A thorough search of the entire house yields no sign of another body, but detectives do find other forensic evidence.
In the master bedroom, there was a small dish, a glass dish with a purple liquid in it, a very strong scented cleaning solution. And of course our thought was that it was meant to try to mask the odor of the decomposing body on the floor.
As CSIs process this evidence, detectives turn their attention back to Mark's body.
When we went in there, we saw blood splatter, ceiling, on the walls.
Based on the spatter and the location of his body and the way the bed was situated, it looked as though he had probably been laying in bed on his left side, head on the pillow, facing away from the door, likely meaning that he never knew that the attack was coming.
As investigators continue examining the crime scene, they find what they believe was the weapon used in the attack on Mark.
In the master bedroom, behind the door, was a large bat-type weapon. This was made out of very thick steel. The steel was rebar, and the head of it was shaped almost like a hammer, was a very, very large nut. It was extremely, extremely heavy.
It had some blood and brain matter on it.
The question now is, who would want this mild-mannered attorney dead? And who would be capable of wielding such a deadly weapon?
We started to think about how strong someone would have to be to use that weapon.
One theory revolves around a very sinister element at work on the streets of Salinas.
Salinas PD does experience a very high violent crime level. We do have a large gang population.
There is a persistent gang problem. It's pervasive here in Salinas. The communities are dealing with it as best they can, but it hasn't gone away yet.
With the house in obvious disarray, and the strange way the doors were screwed shut, police can't help but suspect that Mark's murder may be gang-related. The fact that he's an attorney only adds to that speculation.
Vigorous but honest defense that you can.
In my experience as an attorney, and really for any criminal defense attorney, there's always that chance that a client feels they didn't get a fair shake, and that's something that has to be taken into consideration.
As the coroner removes Mark's body from the house, detectives chart a plan for unraveling this mystery. Their first move is to speak with Mark Hafen's secretary, Missy Tompkins, who was already at the scene when police arrived.
We always ask that they try to keep witnesses or reporting parties around long enough that we can get a statement the day of the incident rather than tracking someone down later and trying to get information that's vital at the time. I was tasked with interviewing Mr. Hafen's secretary, and the last time that the secretary heard from him was Friday afternoon.
We spoke briefly with Missy to find out what she knew when she had last seen him.
Mark was a good guy, funny guy, got along well with everybody. Everybody who knew him loved him.
Missy asserts that Mark had no ties to the Salinas gang scene, nor did he ever legally represent any of the area's drug dealers.
He was not involved in drugs. He was highly against it. I mean, he only took pain pills because he had a bad back.
In their initial search of the house, police found a significant amount of prescription pain pills, and they were legally prescribed. Mark,
the secretary was very privy to Mr. Hafen's personal life. She was very clear that they were not only work associates, but friends.
Mark was genuinely a friend because I went through some family issues while I was working with Mark. He was able to give me some time off.
As detectives continue to press Missy for information, a crowd begins to gather outside the Hafen residence.
The crime scene at Mark's house was kind of like, one of those movies on TV. I remember all his neighbors were out there, and everyone was just so upset that, this happened to him because he was such a good guy.
However, there's one person who's still nowhere to be found. Mark's live-in girlfriend, Virginia. Unsure where Virginia is, or if she's in harm's way, or even alive, detectives dispatch several patrol officers to search for her.
We started going to addresses where she could possibly be, where she's been in the past, and where people say that she might be, looking for her in her car, knocking on doors. And we did that throughout the night. We knocked on some doors at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, trying to find someone that might know her whereabouts.
Coming up, with the search yielding no sign of Virginia, authorities turn to the press for help, and a tip comes in that turns the case on its head and casts a dark shadow over Mark and Virginia's relationship.
She wanted to make it quite clear that Mark was hers and nobody else's.
Police in Salinas, California, are desperately trying to solve the mystery of who killed Mark Hafen, the laid-back attorney and live-in boyfriend of Virginia Turner.
This was kind of a whodunit from the beginning, but we needed to determine what the motive was and why someone would come into this man's home and murder him and leave him to be found.
Adding to the mystery, the fact that Virginia Turner is still missing. After an extensive search comes up empty, detectives decide to cast a wider net.
They released it to the media that Mr. Hafen was deceased, that we were looking for anyone that had any information about how that may have happened, and particularly that we were looking for Virginia Turner.
police don't know if she's dead, if she's alive, or if she's even a suspect in the crime. All they do know is that they need to find out where she is, and they need to find her as soon as possible.
And when the coroner's office releases the results of Mark Hafen's autopsy, a clearer timeline begins to emerge.
Based on the autopsy and the coroner's investigations, determined that Mr. Hafen was probably killed Friday night, maybe early Saturday morning.
And that's not all police learned from the autopsy.
The medical examiner was almost able to match identically the skull up with the shape of the nut on the head of that bat. And there was no question at that point that that had been the murder weapon.
As news of Mark's death and Virginia's disappearance makes its way through Salinas, folks there are inevitably drawn into the case.
He was very well liked. It was a shocker to the community that he had been murdered.
We were fielding phone calls as soon as the media had been notified that Mr. Hafen was deceased, and we were looking for people that had information. We were receiving calls on the hour, people that knew him. We had calls coming all the time.
Within hours, one of those calls provides detectives with a potentially promising lead.
A neighbor calls in and claims that he saw both Virginia and Mark on Friday afternoon before Mark disappeared. The next-door neighbor talked to Virginia sometime in the afternoon. Mr. Hafen actually went golfing with the neighbor's 16-year-old son when he got out of school at 3 o'clock. So Virginia was on the premises talking to the neighbor when the 16-year-old put his clubs
in Mark's car and they were leaving, Virginia said that she needed in the house.
But that's not all. According to the neighbor, later that weekend, another woman came to the house. A woman who he believed to be Mark's housekeeper.
She banged on the window to see if he was home. No one was answering the door.
The neighbor says at that point, the woman went to the back of the house.
We learned that Mr. Hafen had probably died on Friday or early Saturday morning.
Detectives are desperate to find out who this woman is and what, if anything, she has to do with Mark's murder.
The main goal became finding her and figuring out where she was and trying to get her to come in and contact us and make a statement.
Armed with this new information, investigators pay another visit to Mark's secretary, Missy Tompkins, to see if she has any additional information about the woman seen at Mark's house the weekend he was murdered. According to Missy, Mark had recently hired a housekeeper named Miriam Felix.
Miriam Felix went to Mr. Hafen for a divorce from her husband. She had, I think, 2 children, so she was trying to establish life on her own.
Mark always had a housekeeper doing his laundry and, the dry cleaning and cleaning up the house. So he knew that Miriam needed money. So he hired her.
She was in his home on a regular basis, and she would come by the office, and Missy, the secretary, would pay.
But there may have been more to their relationship than it appeared.
Some people do say that they started a romantic relationship.
Mr. Hafen told one of his neighbors that he was interested in her.
She was a very pretty woman, but I don't know if they were dating on that time.
Could Mark Hafen have been caught up in a love triangle that had turned deadly? Now that they have a name, police waste no time trying to locate Miriam Felix.
We started to gather as much information about her as we could. Where does she work? What kind of car does she drive? We were hopeful that we would be able to speak with her and she'd be willing to talk with us.
Within 24 hours, police tracked down Miriam at the apartment she moved into after her divorce. Right away, Miriam admits to being at Mark and Virginia's house the weekend of his murder.
So when we spoke with Miss Felix, she said that she had gone to the house looking for him because she wasn't able to reach him by telephone either, because he owed her some money.
According to Miriam, when she got to Mark's house, Virginia was there.
Miss Felix was banging on the window trying to see if anyone was home. Virginia began to yell at her, cuss at her, call her names, and told her to go away, that if she needed money, she could go to the office and get a check from Missy.
Miriam tells police that at that point she left and never saw or heard from Mark Hafen again.
Detectives asked Miss Felix about the nature of her relationship with Mark. They asked her point blank, "Are you having an affair with him?"
When we talked to Miss Felix, she absolutely denied that.
But if Miriam Felix wasn't having an affair with Mark Hafen, why was Virginia so upset with her?
So at this point, investigators can't definitively know if Miriam is a bona fide suspect and Virginia is also a victim.
There was only one person who could answer that question, and so far, there was no sign of her.
We needed to find Virginia Turner.
On September 2nd, after almost 24 hours of frantic searching, detectives finally get the break they've been looking for.
A community service officer that was working at the front desk at the police department lobby came back into the investigations division and said that Virginia Turner was in the lobby. She had told the community service officer that she wanted to talk with a homicide detective about Mr. Hafen. Her sister had convinced her she needed to come down to the police department to talk with us.
Detectives begin the interview by asking Virginia to pace them through the events of the previous weekend.
She basically said that they had had a fight on Friday night and that he had gone to sleep, he wasn't feeling well, and that he never came out of the bedroom.
Then she went to the home of her mother and said she wasn't feeling well, that her and Mark had a fight.
According to Virginia, she hadn't spoken to Mark since she'd left their house. That's when detectives decide to broach the subject of Mark's death.
I said to her, I want to talk to you about how Mark ended up dead.
Virginia's reaction to the news takes the veteran detectives by surprise.
She basically passed out and she fell off the chair onto the floor.
When she was told that Mark was dead, she didn't believe it. She thought he was just there asleep, so when they said that he was dead, she was totally in a state of shock. She did faint.
The paramedic that got on scene first, they made the determination that because she complaining of heart pain, that they were transported to the hospital.
Now more than ever, detectives believe speaking to Virginia Turner is the key to solving Mark Hafan's murder. The question is, will they ever get that chance? Coming up, detectives zero in on a suspect and discover there may be another side to the story of Mark Hafan's death.
He actually grabbed the metal bar. She says that's when it got physical.
Less than 36 hours into the investigation of Mark Hafan's brutal murder, police in Salinas, California now believe that Mark's girlfriend, Virginia Turner, holds the key to solving the mystery. But when detectives inform Virginia of Mark's death, things take an unexpected turn.
She was complaining of heart pain, that they were transported to the hospital. So our interview ended at that point. The medical personnel checked her out. She didn't have any life-threatening condition.
The following morning, though she still appears to be in a state of shock.
Our interview with Virginia Turner was interesting. She had a flat affect almost the entire time. Very little emotion in her tone. Almost creepy.
Virginia tells the investigators that she and Mark had gotten into a heated argument on Friday night over his supposed feelings for housekeeper Miriam Felix.
I think Virginia was just threatened because she was pretty. Virginia made it clear that, Mark was hers and nobody else's.
At some point in the late hours of Friday or early as Saturday, the argument gets to the point where Mark wants to leave the house. He's taken some medication. He's been drinking a little bit. Virginia says that she doesn't want him to leave. She says that she blocks his access from leaving the bedroom. She says that's when it got physical. He actually, according to her, grabbed the metal bar. He kept it there in the room for home defense, for protection.
She said he had pushed her up against the wall with the rebar under her chin and punched her many times in the face.
When she told us about getting hit over the eye, I looked at it myself very closely, and it may have been slightly swollen, but there was no laceration, there was no bruise. It was hard for me to tell if it was swollen or it wasn't swollen.
Virginia claims that the attack on her winded Mark, who, in an effort to catch his breath, dropped his homemade metal bat.
He sat down on the bed, and she thought he was going to lunge back up at her, so she took the rebar, and she hit him.
She hit him with it. He rolls off of the bed, and she's like, okay, well, this is over. She puts the weapon back up against the wall, and then goes back out into the house, and stays there the whole weekend. And then she just left on Monday.
It's a chilling story, but is it true? Virginia's statement doesn't explain the blankets Mark was wrapped in at the time detectives discovered his body. They press Virginia for an explanation. What she says truly shocks them.
She wrapped him up to keep him warm. The interview with Virginia Turner was surreal. She made it seem as though she were doing him a favor.
It was a bizarre story, to say the least. But detectives are now fairly certain they know who killed Mark Hafan. The real question is, does the killer herself realize what she's done?
She basically said that she had spent the weekend at the house, that he never came out of the bedroom throughout the weekend.
That he might be dead didn't even enter her mind.
Was this truly a case of self-defense, as Virginia claimed? And was an argument over Mark's cleaning lady, Miriam Felix, what actually triggered this fateful encounter? Investigators decide it's time to learn a little bit more about Mark and Virginia's relationship in the day
they fall hard for each other and they're building this perfect little life together. But that's not the picture that Virginia's painting.
As the investigation gets more detailed, we start looking at every instance where someone told us that they had any type of conflict. Are there witnesses to it? Can someone come in and testify to the pattern? I mean, how long has this been going on? Did Virginia ever seek restraining order? Did Mr. Hafan ever seek a restraining order?
Speaking with Mark's friends, investigators learned that Mark and Virginia's relationship had been a healthy one for several years, but had grown increasingly volatile.
They had been on again, off again, and then ultimately in the last year or so it had been very tumultuous.
In fact, in the last 12 months, Mark and Virginia had blazed a trail of arguments, fistfights, restraining orders, and recriminations across the entire city of Salinas.
The type of things that most people don't experience during a relationship. Something drew them together, and something drove them apart. Tumultuous would probably be an understatement.
Mark's associates also claim that the lion's share of the chaos in the relationship stemmed from Virginia's burgeoning drug habit, in particular, her use of methamphetamine.
Mark had mentioned that he caught Virginia taking some drugs and basically gave her an ultimatum. And then just things from there, it just seemed like it was getting worse.
Certainly if someone's taking recreational drugs, that can be an issue, and methamphetamine is particularly powerful.
Allegedly, Virginia's drug habit, coupled with her penchant for jealousy, created drama for Mark at home and at work.
She would call him constantly throughout the day, 10 times, 20 times. They would argue, and it just didn't seem like it was going the right way.
Mark's friends tell detectives that at that point, he decided the best thing for the couple to do was take a little break. But Virginia wasn't having it.
I don't know if she was like stalking him or if she was following him or whatever she was doing, but she was so jealous that she came by the office and she was very irate.
I asked Mark to go back to his office, and that's when I said, I don't want that woman in here again. Get her out of here now. But she kept coming.
He didn't need or want her around anymore, and it just looked as though she could not deal with that. She just could not let go.
But it's Mark's secretary, Missy Tompkins, who reveals the most disturbing incident involving Virginia.
Mark and Virginia got into an argument, and I had went to lunch, and when I came back, there was a butcher knife in my chair.
Everybody's absolutely sure that Virginia stuck that knife in that chair in a fit of pique. That was her way of expressing her anger and kind of like leaving her own personal little calling card.
She thought that he was seeing other women.
Mark's friends say that shortly after the knife incident, Mark decided to make his and Virginia's temporary break a permanent one.
He evicted her. He started an unlawful detainer action that the sheriff came and said that she was no longer allowed to be on his property.
Almost every door and window that we came across had been screwed shut from the inside. Windows into window panes, doors into door jambs. And you immediately began to wonder, is this something the victim did in advance to keep the suspect out? Or is this something the suspect did after the fact?
Mark's friends also tell police that just days before his death, Mark had been rushed to the hospital.
Virginia Turner told the hospital personnel that he had mixed up too many of his medications and he wasn't himself. And when Mark was released from the hospital, he got a copy of the medical report and he went to the hospital and asked to have that changed. He was not taking medication.
He thought that she'd been poisoning him.
This information also shed additional light on the meds that were found in Mark's system at the time of his death. Perhaps Virginia was trying to poison him, and then when that didn't work, she decided to kill him the old-fashioned way. Was Virginia Turner a jealous woman who believed that if she couldn't have Mark Hafen, nobody could? Or had she been telling the truth and killed Mark purely out of self-defense? To help answer that question, police reach out to a man named Gordon Legault, whom Virginia had dated prior to Mark.
I always had an uneasy feeling with her that we could be in a knockdown, drag-out, hollering match at any time. It's kind of like walking on eggshells.
And according to Gordon, a mystery illness similar to Mark's also figured into his breakup with Virginia.
I was curled up in a ball, the house, sweating, chills, so I went to the hospital. Stayed, for 2 days. They didn't have any idea what was wrong with me. I got better, and I went home. My whole family was telling me at the time that she was poisoning me. So I think that had quite a bit to do with her personality. And I think that's how she was with all her relationships. She was insanely jealous.
Gordon Legault's statement casts even more suspicion over Virginia, but detectives are still grappling with one confounding piece of physical evidence.
You see this weapon, you know how heavy it is, you can barely lift it. It would be very difficult to raise above your head and swing.
But according to those who knew Virginia well, she's more than capable of wielding a weapon that heavy.
She worked for years in construction and construction cleanup. She knows her way around a sledgehammer.
Armed with this information, on September 3rd, 2010, the Salinas police book Virginia Turner on the charge of first-degree murder.
We told her that she was under arrest for his murder. At that time, she told intake staff that she wanted to kill herself.
It appears police have everything they need to put Virginia Turner behind bars for the murder of Mark Hafen. Which comes as reassuring news to Mark's friends and colleagues.
She knew that Mark told me everything, and I would be the one that would basically let the police know what was going on. So I was afraid for myself. When I found out that the police had Virginia in their custody, I was relieved.
Coming up, as the case goes to trial, could Virginia's version of events sway the jury in her favor?
He was attacking her, beating her, and she hit him in self-defense to get away from him. She was a battered woman.
Prosecutors in Salinas, California, have formally charged 44-year-old Virginia Turner with the murder of her live-in boyfriend, attorney Mark Hafen.
We found her, but that's a small part of it. Now, if she did it, we need to successfully prosecute her so she doesn't do it to somebody else.
I never go into trial thinking I have a home run. We prepare to rebut every point that the defense is going to raise.
On November 26, 2012, after extensive case preparations and hearings, Virginia Turner's trial gets underway at the Monterey County Courthouse. Having spent the past 2 years in jail, Virginia appears to be a shell of her former self.
I think that her mental state did begin to deteriorate over time being in jail. I think she felt terrible about what happened.
But according to the prosecutor's opening statement, what happened on that fateful night in 2010 was murder, plain and simple.
She killed him because she was jealous. He was pushing her out of the relationship, and she thought he had a new love interest.
According to prosecutors, Virginia tried to poison Mark by pumping him with all sorts of drugs. And when that didn't kill him, she decided to take a more direct approach to ending his life. But Virginia's attorneys tell a different story, one of abuse, and ultimately self-defense. And they have an expert witness to back it up.
I'm an expert in domestic violence, well known around the state. And my assessment of Miss Turner was that she was a battered woman, that she had experienced physical, sexual, verbal, and psychological abuse in her relationship with Mark.
I think she feared for her life. As a result, she picked up this club and hit him over the head, and that checks the boxes on some...
Show me wounds, show me some evidence. There wasn't any.
On December 12th, 2012, the jury delivers its verdict.
She was found guilty and convicted of first-degree murder.
As soon as I heard guilty, I just wanted to, basically cry because, there was justice for Mark.
In the state of California, first-degree murder is 25 years to life. The judge has no discretion.
But even with Virginia now locked away for at least 25 years, those who knew the couple in their better days are still left with the nagging question of why.
I don't see any reason why anything like this should have happened. Sometimes the more you push someone away, the more they become obsessed.
I think that when she met Mark Hafen, she was impressed that he was an attorney, was impressed with the amount of money he was making and the things that he could provide for her. And when he was thinking of leaving her, this was something that she just could not handle, couldn't take, and couldn't accept.
For more information on Snapped, go to Oxygen.com. She was a devoted wife, living in the lap of luxury.
They were rolling in the money, I'll give them that one.
He was a stock car racing star who fell hard for the pit crew beauty.
I think he really loved her, and I think she really loved him.
He was always holding hands, hugging and kissing and all of that,
But when police receive a harrowing 911 call and discover the former racetrack champion dead under mysterious circumstances, investigators suspect there's more to this couple's love life than meets the eye.
Something just doesn't smell right. He told her she was crazy.
Then I've heard drugs, too.
As detectives race to find a killer, they encounter a tightly wound web of lies, conspiracy, and a string of potential suspects around every turn.
Very few times in my career have I actually had the opportunity to talk to a sociopath. This was one.
She was going to take care of it herself.
I couldn't understand it. I still don't.
Wednesday, October 8th, 2008. It's been a relatively quiet afternoon for the emergency dispatchers in Robinson, Texas, a small suburb on the outskirts of Waco. But at 5:23 p.m., a caller in distress prompts an unexpected change of pace.
EMS, what is the address of your emergency?
My husband's laying in a pool of blood. Looks like somebody get in here.
Okay. Is he breathing?
Honey, there's blood all over his bed. My sister. Daddy, so.
Okay, well, I'll have some help on the way. I'm going to stand with you until they get there, okay?
When police arrive, the hysterical woman from the 911 call guides them into the house. The woman identifies herself as Joyce Sturdivant and directs officers to the master bedroom. Lying face down on the bed is her husband, Joe Sturdivant.
He was lying like he was sleeping and had an apparent gunshot wound to the back.
There was stippling, powder burn. That was a fairly close range shot. Did not see any shell casings or anything of that nature.
As officers take a closer look, they notice a second wound.
He was shot in the back of the head. To me, that was the most telling wound because there was blood everywhere.
Called 911. Joyce Sturdivant was born Joyce McMullen in 1945 in Waco, Texas. The McMullens were well-to-do, and Joyce was the baby of the family.
So she was kind of like the spoiled one of the whole family. Even though she was a very pretty woman and kept herself really nice, she had that tomboy side to her that didn't mind getting dirty.
She liked cars and she knew everything about a car.
It was her affection for cars that led Joyce into the arms of her first love, a local race car mechanic named Joe Sullins.
They met on the drag, went out a couple of times, and then they hooked up. They got married.
By her mid-20s, Joyce and her husband had 2 children, and together they ran an operation building stock cars for some of the best drivers on the Texas dirt track circuit.
My dad did build cars, race cars. If he was underneath the hood of one, she was there with him, no matter what it was. She loved it. She loved the speed of it, the adrenaline.
One of the drivers Joyce's husband worked with most was a slightly older man by the name of Joe Sturdivant.
Mom, Dad, and Sturdivant became all friends to the racing end of it, back when he was driving my dad's car.
From a young age, Joe was enamored with the ladies. But at 18, he was forced to settle down when his girlfriend got pregnant.
She was only 15 when they married. They had to get married, and I can remember our daddy marching him down, you got this girl in trouble, you're going to marry her, and he did. But they didn't stay married very long. He had left his first wife and kids. Joe had an eye for the women. There's no getting around that.
But if there was one thing Joe loved more than the ladies, it was racing cars.
He was good on asphalt, but dirt was his game. He'd walk out on the track, and he'd pick up the dirt, and he'd feel of it, and roll it around his hands, and he'd walk around, and he'd walk over and tell his brother what to do to the car. He was the best I ever seen.
On the track, he was tough. It was tough. He won a lot of championships. He was an aggressive driver.
If he lost one time to you, he wasn't going to lose. time.
But in the early 1970s, when Joe locked eyes with the beautiful tomboy who was working on one of his race cars, he knew he'd met his match.
Joyce was a real strong-headed person. I think that's why he was attracted to her. And I think if she was attracted to him, he was a good-looking guy. And as the saying goes...
Despite Joyce being married to one of his close friends, Joe couldn't resist her allure.
It was during the last 6 months of my mom and dad's marriage is when it all fell apart. Because she was sneaking around meeting Sturdivant. So Dad followed him and called him right then, and he told Sturdivant then you could have her.
With their passion for each other running in the red zone, Joe and Joyce married in January of 1973, shortly after her divorce from Joe Sullins was finalized.
They were a very good team. They got along together. I never saw ever have a crossword with one another, ever.
Joe brought Joyce into the fold with his auto business called Sturdivant Auto Transmissions. Trading on Joe's fame as a driver and Joyce's ability to balance the books, Sturdivant Transmissions was a bona fide success.
Joyce run the office at the shop. She took in the money, took it to the bank, and all of that. You know, and Joe, he run the shop. But she ran the office.
Joyce helped build that business as well as Joe did. Joe may have started the business, but I don't think without Joyce it would have been as successful as it was.
And the happy couple didn't mind enjoying the fruits of their success.
She'd see something, say, oh, look there, Joey, that's nice, that's nice. Well, the next day it'd show up at the house, he'd go buy it for her.
They were rolling in the money.
With a solid financial footing, Joe and Joyce were determined to build their dream home.
Joe told me it was 50 acres. He had it surveyed, and he put the house in the middle of it because he didn't want the neighbors.
It was a huge house. It was really, really a nice home.
Joyce and Joe needed all the space they could get, since they were also raising Joyce's children from her first marriage, Tina and little Joe.
Joe was a good dad to him. Sometimes I think he wasn't a good dad to his other children. So he was a good dad to these kids. Whatever those kids wanted, Joe bought for them.
Little Joe tried to drive a race car a little bit. He had the best he could. He wasn't what Big Joe was.
And Joe, he put little Joe to work as one of his employees. And of course he expected more out of him than the other people that worked for him.
By 2000, Joe decided to hang up his helmet, giving up dirt track racing to focus full-time on the transmission business. But after a couple of health scares, Joe decided to step back from the auto shop too.
Joe had some health problems. Joe had bypass surgery.
As his health situation changed, he was kind of glad to take his hands off of that operation, and Joyce was still running the books, and she was still collecting the money, and that aspect of it never changed. He was happy down, or diminishing his involvement, and little Joe saw that opportunity to try to become more involved in running it.
It was very rare for Joe to come in and work near the transmission shop since he'd retired. He was enjoying his retirement.
They had a lot of happy times. It was good.
But in 2008, the Sturdivant family's perfect life is turned upside down when Joe is found dead in his bedroom.
He had been shot while he was asleep. When he went to bed that night, he never woke up.
Coming up, investigators will soon discover there's more to this deadly scene than meets the eye.
A year prior, there was a home invasion there where actually Mr. Sturdivant was assaulted.
68-year-old Texas stock car racing champ Joe Sturdivant has been shot to death in the master bedroom of the dream home he shares with his wife Joyce in suburban Waco.
He was very cold to the touch. He had been there for a while. He was still in his underwear. Appeared that he had never gotten up that morning.
Some of the drawers had been left open as if they had been rifled through, that sort of thing. And then, of course, it was horrific the way that he was shot. And so that caught our attention.
As detectives process the scene, they realize they've been to this residence before, just 1 year ago.
I
I was called out to Sturdivant home on a home invasion. Supposedly, somebody had come to the home while Mr. Sturdivant was sleeping and attacked him.
He awoke him with a black male trying to choke him in the bed, began fighting with him. Last thing he remembered was being hit over the head with something. The bedroom was in disarray. You could tell there'd obviously been a good fight there. There was blood all over the floor. According to Joyce, she was hit over the head and had been knocked out temporarily while this fight was taking place for Joe.
It appeared to be a break-in, and these guys attacked Big Joe. Seemed to make sense that it was just a random burglary.
Joe kept money in the house, a lot of money in the house. And I think him talking about it to people, it probably got around to some undesirable people.
Thankfully, Joe and Joyce survived that attack. But unfortunately for Joe, this time he wouldn't be so lucky.
This just could have been a second attempt of a robbery or a burglary. There was some keys found there.
We did notice that there were an ice pick and like a meat fork in front of that, like if someone tried to pick the door.
He had no reason to suspect anything different than a couple of guys tried to break into his house and rob him.
To unravel the mystery, detectives start with Joe's wife, Joyce. She tells police her husband had still been asleep when she'd left the house that morning.
Joe was still in bed, according to her, and she had gone to work, and it was just a normal day.
She spent 8 hours at work, and when she came home, she found her husband shot and killed in his bed. And she called 911. She was just very cooperative. There's no reason to suspect Joyce.
Knowing that at any time she could leave, we made the decision to go ahead and take her clothes into evidence.
Joyce turns her clothes over to the investigators and grants them permission to conduct a thorough search of the couple's property.
She gave us consent to search the house, looking for a murder weapon or any type of evidence that would assist us.
As CSIs process the house for additional clues, detectives ask Joyce to come down to the station to see if she can help shed light on what might have led to Joe's murder.
You normally get home around 5:30 or?
Anywhere from 4:30 to 5:30.
Did you notice anything out of the ordinary when you came home, or everything looked like he was back home just like a normal day?
Yeah, when I went into the house, I noticed that in the utility room.
Okay.
Okay, the utility room, the kitchen was grass all stowed in there, and drawers were open like for something. Like he'd open a drawer and he'd just jerk everything out and throw it up on the counter.
Okay.
And I'd come along behind, pick it back up and put it back up. And I'm hollering at him for getting grass. Oh, I'm cussing him because he's late. I'm sorry, I just feel like cussing him. He didn't do it. And went around the corner back there, and he was still in bed. And I thought first he had another heart attack. He was in an awkward position, so I went over to the bed and shaking the covers.
Right.
And he didn't do anything. And so I reached up a little further and shook him again. So I put my hands on him and trying to roll him over, and I was shaking him.
But could Joe's murder have any connection to the robbery a year earlier?
They took the money.
Okay. Did he carry a wallet? Okay. Did not carry a wallet. Okay.
He just carried his money, a rubber band, just wrap it up like a half sandwich and put a rubber band around it.
Okay.
That was his money clip.
Okay. How much cash did he normally on him?
He probably have anywhere from $500 to $5,000. I never knew what he had.
Joyce explains that 2 handguns, a watch, and some of her jewelry are also missing.
Butterfly. Okay, is pink. Not bright pink, it's a pale pink.
Okay.
Like the wings are outlined in little small balance. I've got the blue one.
Picture that for us.
got his blood off.
Despite signs that point to a robbery gone awry, detectives know it's highly unusual for a thief to strike the same place twice.
We immediately have to look at our victim. Maybe enemies that he may have had, reasons why somebody would want to murder Joe.
He hasn't said anything or mentioned anything about any trouble with anybody or anything like that. Can you think of anybody that would want to harm him for any reason?
Joe was real proud. He had trouble with somebody or something. I may not find out about it 5-6 months till he took care of it himself.
Following Joyce's interview, robbery still seems the most likely motive, but as CSIs continue to process the scene, they uncover additional evidence that seems to call that theory into question.
Normally in a burglary situation, if you're going to open drawers, you're going to dump the contents out. There were some of the drawers in the dresser that appeared to have just been opened.
Detectives also noticed something odd about the gun safe.
Not many people would use a pipe wrench to try to get into a safe.
And if this wasn't a real robbery attempt, maybe that first home invasion wasn't either.
Whoever tried the first time, maybe it was more than a home invasion. Sounds like they were maybe trying to kill him then, and succeeded this time.
In her interview with police, Joyce told detectives that she didn't know anyone who would want to kill her husband. But as investigators question others familiar with Joe, they uncover an entirely different story.
Cases such as these in smaller communities, you get a lot of people call in. A lot of them are rumors, but we record all these calls, all these tips, receive some information that Mr. Sturdivant may be involved in some type of drug trafficking.
As police dig into the drug angle, they receive a new lead, one that suggests another, equally salacious motive behind Joe Sturdivant's murder.
Joe was accused of, back then it was sexual misconduct.
Former Texas race car driver Joe Sturdivant and his loving wife Joyce were living a dream life together. But on the 8th of October 2008, Joe was found dead in his home.
Joe was known to keep cash around, always had guns. He always was known to keep a large amount of cash on him. Our main initial thought was that someone attempted to rob the house.
But as investigators speak to others in the tiny town of Robinson, another possible motive for the crime comes to light.
Cases such as these in smaller communities, you get a lot of people call in. We document and record all these calls, all these tips, receive some information that Mr. Sturdivant may be involved in some type of drug trafficking.
You hear the rumors he was transporting narcotics or he was only dealing in cash and he's got it buried out here. We heard a lot of that.
We talked with those family, friends, and associates, and never once did we ever get any credible information that that was true.
If the murder is not related to drugs, Joe's friends and family inform police of another possible motive tied to Joe's well-known affinity for women, jealousy.
He had a lot of affairs. So this could have been one of angry husbands or boyfriends.
However, the condition of the crime scene suggests the killer was someone more familiar to Joe and his pair of hyper-vigilant watchdogs.
The house was basically secure. There was no evidence of any break-in.
Whoever did this was able to get in the house without alarming the dogs. They had bitten some of the rescue personnel that were trying to come in, barked continuously. For them not to wake Joe up, it had to be somebody that the dogs knew.
With nowhere else to turn, investigators decide to take a deeper look into Joe Sturdivant's past. That's when Joe's stepdaughter Tina comes forward with some new, eye-opening information.
Joe wasn't a saint. Back in the 70s, he was indicted. He was accused of molesting a family member.
That was an incident involving Joyce's daughter, where Joe was accused of sexual misconduct.
Other people started coming forward. I wonder why 3 of my best friends never never wanted to come back over or spend the night. And that was why.
Although others came forward with accusations of abuse, Joe adamantly denied these charges. And through it all, Joyce stood by him.
Joyce took Joe's side over the daughter back then.
She chose him over me, and I'm your daughter. She chose his side. She made her decision. She's my mom. I love her. It's just hard to forgive her.
Despite the severity of the accusations, Joe managed to avoid any jail time.
When I pressed charges, of course, I had to go before the grand jury, and they indicted him. And they arrested him. But he makes bond. And was ready to go to trial that day, and he made a plea bargain. So he got 10 years probation with the fine. Which wasn't nearly enough, but he's the one that's had to answer for it.
He had a past, and we had to look at all those avenues and any possibilities that could have something come up over years of a grudge.
But in speaking with Joyce's daughter, Tina, it's clear to investigators that she had nothing to do with her stepdad's murder.
The daughter really hadn't had any contact with Joyce or Joe for, 20, 30 years at that point.
Those type of leads you have to look into, especially in a circumstantial case. You don't ever want to leave any rabbit trails unlooked at. It was ruled out pretty quick.
Someone would give us a name, and we would look into that, and we'd be able to pretty quickly exclude them simply due to the fact that either they were out of state or, there was no obvious contact there for several years.
But if stepdaughter Tina or Joe's other victims aren't responsible for his death, is it possible that stepson Little Joe is responsible? After all, Little Joe had put in years of work at his stepfather's auto business. Maybe he decided that it was finally time to get what he thought he deserved.
I always thought that Little Joe had something to do with it. I think he did not work a whole lot. I think he and Joe had not parted ways, but I think Joe had gotten enough of Little Joe not working like he should, and I think Joe was fixing to cut the money off, and I think Little Joe got mad at Big Joe.
Quite frankly, I thought it might have been Little Joe. Now, of course, we didn't have any evidence on Joe other than he was very familiar with the layout, with the dogs, but I believe the detectives also checked out and he had an outfit. And there was no one else that we could focus in on.
With no other leads and no physical evidence tying a suspect to the crime, the case comes to a standstill. Then, on October 13th, 2008, police get a phone call that changes everything.
Out of the blue, we got a call from the jail. One of the supervisors out there said they had someone in jail that had some information about the murder, and they wanted to talk to us.
An individual who calls himself Cowboy Tate. The informant was actually in there on a non-payment of child support, never asked for anything in return for his information.
I heard his name on the news, but I understand like that's who was murdered, right? Correct. I was approaching on this back in the summer.
He started telling us that he was approached by a lady that he knew. They were hanging around at some apartment complexes in Waco. They hang out at different pools, drink beer, and she had been asking him if either he would or if he knew of someone who would murder someone for money.
Cowboy Tate tells detectives that the woman's name is Deborah Dietrich. This is the first investigators have heard of Deborah Dietrich. Could she be one of Joe's jilted lovers? What Cowboy Tate reveals next will steer the investigation in a whole new direction.
When you look at the big picture, what they say makes perfect sense in the context of what has happened here. She pointed him out and said, that's the man that we need murdered.
He was mean to her. He treated her like shit.
It's been nearly a week since Joyce Sturdivant's frantic 911 911 call hurled investigators into the baffling case of her husband Joe's murder. But now, detectives have finally received a break.
They had someone in jail that had some information about the murder, and they wanted to talk to us.
The man, who goes by Cowboy Tate, tells detectives a woman named Deborah Dietrich approached him with a proposition.
She actually took him to a parking lot across from Joe Sturdivant's favorite cafe. She pointed him out, Joe Sturdivant, in the vehicle he was driving, and said, "That's the man that we need murdered."
She thought I was a badass. I told Debbie out of it. I swear to God, I told Debbie.
He told her she was crazy to show up. They were tied up on calls, and in the process, the informant got scared and went back to work.
Detectives question why Deborah Dietrich might have wanted Joe Sturdivant dead. That's when Cowboy Tate drops a bombshell. According to him, Deborah wasn't hiring a hitman for herself.
I know for a fact his wife had it done. That's what I heard. He was mean to her and treated her like
Joyce had convinced Deborah that she was being abused by Joe and mistreated, and that the only escape that she had was to get rid of him.
I wasn't surprised. We all knew that if something ever happened to Joe, it was one of two things. It was either a jealous husband or Joyce.
Armed with this game-changing revelation, police need to track down Deborah.
Conducted surveillance on the apartment complex when she was coming home. Approached her, introduced ourselves, asked her if she'd be willing to talk to us, and she agreed, and she actually followed us out here to the police department.
According to Deborah, she'd gotten to know Joyce after she delivered parts to the auto shop.
They developed this friendship, and I guess Joyce must have felt like, it was a pretty close relationship.
As soon as your husband taken care of, what did you mean by taken care of?
Just, talk to Cowboy. Cowboy told me, no, Debbie, you don't know what you're getting into. You don't want to be running today, but either just leave it alone.
Talk to anybody else, or?
I dropped it.
Okay. And then how did it come up again?
She kept on asking me.
Deborah says that's when she reached out to another man named Carlos, an acquaintance of Cowboy Tate.
And I met Carlos.
What did you say to him?
I was going to be any bad people that could take care of somebody. I said, yeah.
Deborah encountered these guys out at her apartment complex, and they got to know each other, and she felt like they could carry the plan out.
They wanted, cash. They wanted $20,000. Debbie told us when she approached Joyce, about the money, she said, "I've got these rings, and they're worth a whole lot more money than that."
Okay. She hands the rings to you and says, "Here's the payment for them to kill me." Did she say anything else?
You hurry up and do it.
But according to Deborah, the two hitmen took...
So basically, they just, they ripped off Joyce and Debbie at that point. Debbie said when she told Joyce about it, she got pretty upset.
I guess she was going to take care of it herself.
Take care of herself,
Do it herself.
She was going to kill him herself.
At that point, we were feeling real confident. We're getting to a point where we were able to confirm stories.
He had the jail informant, which helped us corroborate that.
On October 16th, 2008, police tracked down one of the alleged hitmen, Carlos Garcia.
He tells us that David approached him and a friend of his about killing somebody, and they thought she was crazy. We never intended to kill anybody. We were just going to try to roll Debbie.
After speaking with Carlos, detectives are eager to once again talk to Joyce Sturdivant. But before they get that chance, a call comes in from Deborah Dietrich, who says she has more information she wants to get off her chest.
She came in and her conscience just told her she needed to come let somebody know.
She was going to do it while he was still laying in the bed. Because she was going to shoot him. And she would need to come to work come home and she wanted to find him. She said she was going to ransack the house, make it look like somebody broke in. Here's something else too. She just told me that she's tried to have him dropped off once before.
Did she tell you when she done this? Or when that happened?
She said a year ago.
According to Deborah, the home invasion in 2007 was Joyce's first attempt at killing Joe. She says that one of the men involved in the attack is a friend of hers named Ali Mohammed, who went by the nickname Doc.
I went to Doc's house. His initial response was, well, I wondered how long he's going to take y'all to come talk to me. It was almost like it was a relief to him.
He had known the Sturdivants for many, many years.
What Joyce had been feeding him was that Joe had been abusing her, both verbally and physically.
But was Joyce Sturdivant truly a victim of abuse? Detectives aren't so sure.
We looked into that. We found no indication, no reports where the police had been called. Doc was just, whatever Joyce told him, he pretty much believed.
He needed money. He was in a money bind. And so she loaned it to him.
But according to Doc, even after getting paid, he still wasn't up to carrying out Joyce's hit on Joe.
He was not healthy enough to climb the fence and go in there and fight Joe. So he had a friend of his, Chris Chapman, tells him to rough up the guy.
Mohammed provided him with a knife and then a gun to go in and teach Mr. Joe Sturdivant a lesson.
In the end, Joe woke up right before the attack, and he was the one who taught Chapman a lesson.
He said when he got in the house, Joe Sturdivant got the best of him. He was actually scared Joe Sturdivant was going to take his life. He was lucky to have fled the house alive.
Now investigators have multiple reports detailing Joyce's murderous plans. But with no proof of abuse at the hands of Joe, what other motive could Joyce have to have him killed? When questioned further, Mohammed reveals a key piece of information about his relationship with Joyce.
We learned that he had been actually selling prescription pills to Joyce.
In talking with Ali, she was taking a lot of the pills a day. She would do just about anything to satisfy her addiction.
To corroborate Mohammed's story, police sit down with Joyce's son, Little Joe, and his wife to see if they can shed some light on the Sturdivants' family life.
For the last 10 years, she's been embezzling from the company on a regular basis, sometimes to the tune of $3,000 and $4,000 a week.
She was buying quite a few pills. There were some people there at the shop that I'm sure she was giving money to.
Financial records of his transmission shop were not good. They owed a lot of back taxes, had a lot of debt, and seriously doubt Joe Sturdivant knew about that.
She just depleted the business of money. And that was her only way out, was to kill him.
Other than control of the business, control of the money, she got $92,000 life insurance.
Little Joe also confirms that the abuse allegations are a lie.
Was your dad abusive to your mom?
No. They had arguments back and forth, but he was not ever physically abusive.
Despite the circumstantial evidence pointing to Joyce as her husband's killer, investigators still don't have the smoking gun that places her in the room with Joe at the time of the murder.
We obviously didn't have the murder weapon. Lacked a lot of physical evidence. The persistence in the case was very important. These guys were persistent. It was a lengthy process.
After over 2 years searching for something substantial, detectives finally uncover a crucial piece of evidence obtained in the original investigation.
In reviewing the overall evidence that was found initially at the scene, the detective had enough insight into taking her clothes.
However, because Joyce was not initially a suspect, her clothes remained untested until February 17th, 2011.
On Joyce Sturdivant's jacket.
Coupled with the circumstantial evidence, the gunshot residue gives detectives the ammunition they need to charge Joyce with Joe's murder. On March 16th, 2011, they arrest her at the Sturdivant Auto Shop.
She couldn't believe that we were arresting her. It had been so long, she thought she'd gotten away with it.
Joyce is charged with capital murder and attempted capital murder. Bail is set at $1 million.
This didn't match what I'd seen in the past. I didn't see the dark side of her.
I mean, it was hurtful. She's my mom, but everything was still a shock.
If Joyce Sturdivant's arrest was shocking, her trial would be a full-blown circus, with Joyce herself in the center ring.
As soon as the cross-examination started, it was like the other Joyce came out.
By March of 2011, after evading prosecution for nearly 3 years, Joyce Sturdivant's murderous plot to kill her husband Joe has finally caught up to her.
All the evidence pointed to Joyce Sturdivant.
When the trial begins on November 28th, 2011, prosecutors pace jurors through the day they say Joyce finally pulled the trigger.
She got up at the same time she normally does. But instead of telling her husband goodbye that morning, she shot him. And I believe after she shot him, at that point, I believe that's when Joyce Sturdivant realized he wasn't dead.
She thought he killed him when she shot him in the back. What we believe happened was that he was still breathing, and what she heard was a gurgling. When she went back in and finished him off, that's when she shot him in the back of the head to finish the job.
She just went to work and acted like nothing ever happened. Now, it takes a pretty cold person just to be able to pull that off.
When it's their turn to counter, Joyce's defense team sticks to her original claim that Joe was the victim of a robbery gone awry. They also double down on the assertion that Joyce was a victim of abuse, and then call Joyce to the stand to tell the jury her story.
She took the stand and played the frail, walking up there with a cane, and my poor husband was killed, and I'm the one who found the body, and tried to really play up the sympathy.
But her testimony can't... Nor can it eliminate the sworn testimony of everyone Joyce tried to enlist in the murder of her husband.
Witnesses are very important. And without a lot of physical evidence, you're going to rely on a lot of the testimony from these people. And when their stories all come together, and the story's all the same, it's definitely exciting for your case.
On December 2nd, 2011, the jury returns with their verdict.
The judge read the verdict. We, the jury, find the defendant. He kind of hesitated, and then he said, guilty of murder.
I did not see really any reaction from Mom whatsoever, and they took her away.
They assessed punishment at 30 years on the murder and 15 on the attempted capital murder. At her age, at 67, she'll spend the remainder of her life in the penitentiary.
Though most people in this small Texas town are convinced Joyce pulled the trigger, not everyone agrees about why.
I do think probably she got hooked on pain-killing drugs, and she just depleted the business of money.
I truly believe she had finally had enough with everything that had gone on through the years. When you get tired enough of something, something's gonna snap.
For more information on Snapped, go to Oxygen.com.
这应该是跟这背景画，我都应该坐中间来的。谢谢喵敏，谢谢喵敏的幽默。大海，爱是我的。这缆车多少钱？60块钱往返，大家。 要掉下怎么办？真是兄弟，你说万一要是他妈这链子松了怎么办啊？西酱，在吗？西酱，马老板 mini， 咱家41大哥在吗？秋风兄弟呀，秋月呀，帮我喊个喇叭呗，分区喇叭。宾带你看大海，喊个分区喇叭，41大哥们。我操！或者说打斌子掉海里了也行，斌子掉海里了，省点啊哥几个，用2个得了，咱们29还得用啊mini 小西酱，我的真爱们，省点再喊2个得了，赶上了就赶上了，赶不上就赶不上了。发过了，谢谢秋风。我现在所在的位置是秦皇岛秦皇岛市北戴河，然后呢，咱们要去的是暹罗岛，这是我国唯一的一个跨海索道。我现在是在，这应该是北戴河，这应该是渤海啊。你说万一啊，我就说万一啊，你说万一这要真他妈掉下去了，这他妈不就完了吗？你妈谁救你来呀？这他妈离岸那么远，你都真过来游过来，就你早他妈挂了。真是哎，你说就算这底下有救生圈，可是你说你都掉海里了，这人就懵逼了，都哪有功夫勾救生圈去？对一个不会游泳的人来说，你要等岸边的人过来，我估计准他妈，哎呦完了，真是。